If you wish to be respected, respect yourself. Epictetus. What if I told you that the biggest reason people don't take you seriously has nothing to do with your looks, your money, or your status, but with a few quiet habits you practice every single day, often without realizing it? Habits so subtle they feel harmless, yet powerful enough to erode your respect in conversations, relationships, and even in your own mind. You might be disciplined. You might be intelligent. You might even be kind. And still, these habits can silently undermine how others see you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. The Stoics understood something most people ignore. Respect is not demanded, chased, or negotiated. It is revealed through behavior, through what you tolerate, through what you react to, through what you allow to control you. Lose control there and respect leaks away, slowly, invisibly, but inevitably. In this video, we're going to expose 10 habits that destroy your respect, not from modern opinion, but through the timeless lens of Stoic wisdom. These are patterns warned against. These are behaviors Seneca cautioned would weaken a man from the inside out. Watch this video till the very end, because the final habits are the ones most people never question, and breaking them can fundamentally change how you carry yourself, how others respond to you, and how firmly you stand in your own values. Number 1, seeking validation instead of self-approval. Seeking validation instead of self-approval is one of the quietest ways you give away your power, and the most dangerous part is that it feels harmless at first. You tell yourself you're just being agreeable, just staying likable, just making sure you're seen the right way. But slowly, almost invisibly, your sense of worth drifts out of your own hands and into the unpredictable opinions of others. The Stoics warned about this long before social approval became currency. Wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." When you live this way, respect erodes from the inside. You stop standing firmly in who you are because you're constantly adjusting, scanning faces, reading reactions, waiting for permission to feel okay. When you seek validation, you're teaching yourself that your judgment is not enough. You begin to outsource your self-esteem. Your mood rises and falls based on feedback you don't control. Approval becomes a drug, and like all dependencies, it weakens you over time. Seneca warned that he who depends on himself alone is powerful, he who depends on others is weak. Read that slowly. This isn't about arrogance or isolation. It's about authority over your inner life. When you don't approve of yourself first, no amount of praise will ever feel secure. You'll always need more, and people sense this need instantly. Respect fades when your confidence looks borrowed instead of rooted. There's a subtle anxiety that comes with chasing validation. You start anticipating reactions before you even act. You rehearse words in your head not based on truth, but on acceptance. Over time, this fractures your integrity. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can hurt you by their opinion." When you internalize this, something shifts. You realize that every time you bend yourself to be approved, you're quietly telling the world that you don't trust your own standards. And if you don't trust them, why should anyone else? Self-approval is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's calm, grounded, almost invisible. It's the quiet decision to respect your own judgment even when it isn't celebrated. This is where Stoicism becomes practical, not philosophical. The Stoics didn't seek applause, they sought alignment. Reminded himself daily, "I have to do what is right. The rest doesn't matter." That sentence alone can dismantle your need for validation if you let it. You don't need agreement to act rightly. You don't need praise to remain steady. You only need clarity about your values. If you want to rebuild respect, you must retrain your inner dialogue. Start noticing how often you look outward for confirmation. Notice how quickly you doubt yourself when approval is missing. Don't judge this habit, observe it. The Stoics believed awareness was the first form of discipline. Once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. When you feel the urge to seek reassurance, pause, ask yourself one question: do I approve of this choice? Nor will they like it, not will it be praised, just this. This question recenters authority back where it belongs. Here's a simple Stoic exercise to practice daily. At the end of the day, sit quietly and review your actions, not through the lens of how others might have perceived them, but through your own principles. Ask yourself where you acted with integrity and where you compromised it for approval. Seneca practiced this exact reflection and wrote about it often. This isn't self-criticism, it's self-ownership. Over time, this habit strengthens your internal compass. You begin to trust yourself again. And when you trust yourself, your presence changes. Another practice is voluntary detachment from praise. When approval comes, acknowledge it without clinging to it. Let it pass through you without becoming part of your identity. Warned, be content to see what you really are. This doesn't mean rejecting positive feedback. It means not building your self-worth on it. When praise no longer defines you, criticism loses its power too. You become balanced, centered, harder to shake. You should also train yourself to sit with disapproval without reacting, not resisting it, not correcting it, just allowing it to exist without internal collapse. This is where real respect begins to form, both self-respect and the kind others feel without knowing why. Epictetus said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not defend yourself, but reply, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" There's humor here, but also strength. When you stop defending your image, you stop being controlled by it. Self-approval doesn't mean you're finished growing. It means growth is guided by values, not applause. When you improve yourself to be approved, you become dependent. When you improve yourself to be aligned, you become formidable. People respect those who don't need to be liked to remain steady. There's a calm gravity to them. They don't chase attention. They don't explain themselves excessively. They don't fold under pressure. They move deliberately. If you want to adopt this habit deeply, create a short list of non-negotiable principles. Not goals, principles. Things you approve of regardless of outcome. Revisit them often. Measure yourself against them, not against reactions. This is pure Stoicism in action. Lived by this internal law, reminding himself that the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. When your thoughts are anchored in self-approval, your emotional life stabilizes. Let go of the illusion that validation brings security. It doesn't, it brings dependency. Self-approval brings freedom, and freedom is magnetic. When you stop asking, "Do they approve of me?" and start living from "I approve of myself when I act rightly," something fundamental shifts. You stand taller without trying. You speak less but mean more. You no longer perform, you express. And that is where respect is born. Take this seriously. Practice it daily. Catch yourself when you reach outward and gently pull that authority back inward. This is not an overnight change, but it is a decisive one. The Stoics didn't seek to control others. They sought to master themselves. Do the same. Approve of yourself first. Everything else will follow. Number 2, yourself to people who don't care. There is a quiet way people lose respect, and it rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It happens sentence by sentence, explanation by explanation, as you keep talking long after your point was already clear. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters." What he was pointing to was not ignorance but restraint. Power lives in restraint. Respect grows when you don't feel the need to convince, justify, or defend yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. When you give away something valuable, your composure. You don't because you are weak. You because part of you wants approval. Part of you hopes that if you just add one more sentence, one more clarification, one more justification, the other person will finally understand, finally agree, finally validate you. But wrote, "I do my duty, other things trouble me not." Read that slowly. He did not say, "I explain my duty until everyone agrees." He said he does his duty and lets go. When you reverse this order. You start needing agreement before you feel at peace. That dependence quietly erodes respect, both yours and theirs. Here is the uncomfortable truth you must face if you want to grow. People who don't care will never care more because you explained better. They will care less. Every extra word signals uncertainty. Every added clarification suggests you're seeking permission. Seneca captured this when he said, "He who is brave is free." Freedom here is internal. It is freedom from the urge to be understood by everyone. When you keep talking to those who have already made up their minds, you are not communicating. You are negotiating your self-worth. Stoicism teaches you to separate what is yours from what is not. Your intentions are yours. Your effort is yours. Your clarity is yours. Other people's reactions are not. The moment you cross that boundary, you step into their mind and start rearranging furniture that isn't yours. And the more you do this, the more you teach others that your decisions are open for debate, interrogation, and approval. Respect cannot survive in that environment. You need to understand that silence is not weakness. Brevity is not rudeness. Calm is not indifference. Reminded himself daily, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Is arguing, restraint is being. When your actions are aligned, your words don't need padding. They stand on their own. When you trust yourself, you stop auditioning for agreement. There is also something deeper happening when you are trying to control outcomes. You want to control how you are perceived. You want to control misunderstanding. You want to control judgment. The Stoics would tell you this is where suffering begins. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Your words are in your power. Their interpretation is not. Learn where to stop. Learn where your responsibility ends. If you want respect, you must first respect your own time, energy, and inner balance. Talking too much to people who don't care is a form of self-betrayal. You are giving effort where there is no return. Stoicism is ruthless about this. Not cruel, efficient. Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it. Wastes life. It drains you, dulls your presence, and leaves you feeling oddly empty afterward." Here is a simple but challenging exercise. For the next few days before you respond to anyone, pause and ask yourself one question. Is this explanation for clarity or for approval? Be honest. If it's for approval, stop. Say less. Let the silence sit. You will feel discomfort at first. That discomfort is withdrawal from validation addiction. Sit with it. Breathe. You are not in danger. You are becoming grounded. Another exercise is to practice intentional brevity. Decide in advance that you will express your point once clearly and then stop. No follow-ups unless there is a genuine request for clarification. This trains self-trust. It also trains others to take your words seriously. When you speak less, people listen more. Not because you demand attention, but because you no longer chase it. You should also train your mind to accept misunderstanding without panic. Wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." Read that again. Is proof of that imbalance. Correct it by anchoring yourself internally. After you speak, remind yourself, "I have said enough." Repeat it. Let that be your boundary. Over time, something shifts. Your voice becomes calmer. Your posture changes. You no longer rush to fill silence. You no longer feel exposed when someone disagrees. This is Stoic strength. Quiet, unshaken, unneedy. Respect follows this naturally, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Remember, you are not here to convince everyone. You are here to live in alignment with reason, virtue, and self-command. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be and then do what you have to do." Notice what he left out. He did not say to explain it repeatedly. When you stop leaking power. You reclaim your presence. And in that presence, respect grows silently, steadily, inevitably. Number 3. Reacting emotionally to provocation or criticism. Reacting emotionally to provocation or criticism quietly erodes your respect faster than almost anything else, and the damage often happens before you even realize what you've done. The moment you snap, justify, defend, or explain yourself under pressure, you hand over control. You may feel relief for a second, but what you're really doing is broadcasting that your emotions are easy to hijack. The Stoics understood this deeply. Warned, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. That line isn't philosophy for decoration. It's a mirror. It asks you to look at how quickly you let other people dictate your inner state. Every time you react without pause, you teach the world that your composure is negotiable. You don't lose respect because someone criticizes you. You lose respect because you rush to react as if the criticism owns you. Anger, sarcasm, wounded pride, defensive explanations, these aren't strength, they're leaks, and people sense them instantly. Epictetus was blunt about this. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's not about humiliation. It's about restraint. It's about refusing to perform emotionally just because someone poked at you. When you react emotionally, you reveal attachment to approval. You reveal fear of judgment. You reveal that your self-image is fragile enough to need constant protection. None of that inspires respect, no matter how clever your words sound in the moment. You don't need to silence every critic. You don't need to win every exchange. In fact, the habit of trying to win through emotional reaction is what traps you. The Stoics taught that dignity comes from self-command. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the courage to pause, to feel the emotional surge and not obey it, to let words pass through you without demanding a response. When you react instantly, you shrink your time horizon down to seconds. When you pause, you reclaim authority over yourself. That pause is where respect is born. You might tell yourself that reacting shows passion or honesty, but that's a comforting story. What it really shows is impatience with discomfort. Criticism stings because it threatens how you see yourself. Provocation irritates because it challenges your sense of control. The Stoic response isn't suppression, it's mastery. Reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The habit you're building isn't silence for the sake of silence. It's the discipline of choosing your response instead of being dragged into one. If you want to break this habit, you start by changing how you see provocation. Instead of seeing it as an attack, see it as a test. Not a test you have to pass publicly, but a private test of your self-command. Each moment of criticism becomes training. Each provocation becomes resistance. You don't grow stronger by reacting. You grow stronger by restraining yourself. That restraint isn't weakness. It's pressure held calmly. And pressure held calmly is what people respect, even if they don't consciously know why. One practical exercise is brutally simple and surprisingly difficult. Impose a mandatory delay between stimulus and response. Decide in advance that you will not respond emotionally in the first breath, the first sentence, or the first impulse. Count silently. Let the emotional wave crest and pass. You'll notice something important if you do this consistently. Most reactions lose their urgency when given a few seconds of space. What felt necessary suddenly feels optional. That space is freedom. That space is where your respect lives. Another exercise is to rehearse indifference. Not apathy, but grounded neutrality. When you feel provoked, repeat a Stoic reminder internally, something like, "This is not under my control," or "This does not touch my character." You're not lying to yourself, you're recentering. Epictetus emphasized this constant inner dialogue because he knew the mind needs direction under pressure. Without it, emotion takes the wheel. With it, you remain seated firmly in yourself. You should also practice voluntary silence. Silence is uncomfortable when your ego wants to speak. That discomfort is the point. Train yourself to let comments land without commentary. You'll discover that silence often communicates far more strength than any response could. Seneca observed, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Delay isn't avoidance, it's refinement. It allows you to respond later if needed from clarity rather than heat, and clarity commands respect without effort. This habit also requires you to loosen your grip on being understood. Emotional reactions often come from the urge to correct, explain, or defend your image. Let that go. You don't need to manage every perception. Advised, it never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people but care more about their opinion than our own. Sit with that. The more you chase approval through reaction, the more respect slips through your fingers. The less you chase it, the more naturally it arrives. Over time, as you practice non-reaction, something shifts inside you. You become slower to anger not because you're numb, but because you're anchored. Your emotional world becomes harder to invade. People feel it. They may not articulate it, but they sense that you're not easily moved, not easily rattled, not easily pulled into noise. That steadiness is magnetic. It signals maturity, self-trust, and inner order. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming deliberate. You still feel. You still think. You just don't spill your inner state at the feet of every comment or critique. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They were disciplined. And discipline is what transforms raw emotion into quiet authority. So take this seriously. Treat every provocation as practice, every criticism as a weight you lift internally. Pause, breathe, choose, repeat. Over time, reacting emotionally will feel beneath you not because you're superior but because you've it. And when that happens, respect stops being something you chase. It becomes something you carry with you calmly wherever you go. Number 4, saying yes when you mean no. When you say yes while something inside you is clearly saying no, you quietly trade a piece of your self-respect for temporary comfort. It doesn't happen loudly. There's no dramatic collapse. It happens in small moments where you override your own judgment to avoid friction, disappointment, or disapproval. And over time, people don't just notice it, you start to feel it. Warned, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That includes the promises you make with your mouth that your mind and body never agreed to. Each false yes teaches others that your boundaries are flexible, negotiable, and ultimately, more importantly, it teaches you the same lesson. You may tell yourself you're being kind, cooperative, or understanding, but deep down, you know the difference between generosity and self-betrayal. Stoicism never asked you to be agreeable at the cost of your integrity. Epictetus was clear that freedom begins the moment you stop being ruled by fear, especially the fear of losing approval. Every unnecessary yes is rooted in that fear. Fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being seen as difficult. Yet respect is not built by being easy to use. It's built when your words carry weight, when people know that if you agree to something, it's real, deliberate, and backed by conviction. There's a quiet confidence that comes from alignment, when what you think, feel, and say are in harmony. Saying no when you mean no is not harsh, it's honest, and honesty creates clarity. Clarity creates trust. Even when others do like your answer, they sense the solidity behind it. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Courage isn't loud dominance. Sometimes it's the calm refusal to act against yourself. When you abandon that courage, when you nod along while resisting internally, resentment begins to form. You may not express it outwardly, but it corrodes you from within. Resentment is the tax you pay for living without boundaries. You don't lose respect in one grand moment. You lose it gradually by training people to expect compliance instead of truth. When your yes becomes automatic, it becomes meaningless. People stop seeing it as a choice and start seeing it as a default, and defaults are taken for granted. Stoicism teaches mastery over impulses, but it also teaches loyalty to reason. If reason tells you no, but your mouth says yes, you've inverted the Stoic order. You've placed external comfort above internal alignment. That imbalance always shows, even if no one says it out loud. The most dangerous part is what happens inside you. Each time you override your inner signal, you weaken your self-trust. You start doubting your own judgment. You hesitate longer. You feel less grounded. Reminded himself daily not to act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. That urgency matters here. Life is too short to be lived on borrowed intentions. When you say yes out of habit, you drift. When you say no with clarity, you anchor yourself. This habit can be unlearned, but it requires conscious practice. Start by slowing down your responses. You don't owe anyone an immediate answer. Silence is not rudeness, it's space. Train yourself to pause before agreeing. Feel your body, notice resistance. Stoics believe the body often registers truth before the mind rationalizes it away. If tension appears, pay attention. That tension is information. Write this down somewhere, you'll see it daily. I am allowed to choose. Repeat it until it feels ordinary. Another practice is verbal restraint. You don't need elaborate explanations to justify a no. Overexplaining is another form of seeking approval. A simple, calm refusal is enough. Seneca warned against becoming a slave to hope, and hope here often disguises itself as hoping others will understand, accept, or praise your choice. Let go of that. Your responsibility is not to manage reactions. It's to act with integrity. Each time you do, your sense of self strengthens. You can also rehearse discomfort. Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort to reduce fear. Apply that principle here. Imagine the moment of saying no. Feel the unease without escaping it. Let it pass. Discomfort is temporary. Loss of self-respect lingers. Over time, your nervous system learns that nothing catastrophic happens when you choose yourself. You remain standing. The world continues, and something subtle but powerful shifts in how you carry yourself. Respect follows consistency. When your words and actions align repeatedly, people adjust. Some may push back at first. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign the old pattern is breaking. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In modern terms, that means being willing to be misunderstood while you reclaim your spine. You're not here to be endlessly agreeable. You're here to live deliberately. Saying no when you mean no is not about becoming rigid or cold. It's about becoming honest. It's about choosing long-term self-respect over short-term relief. When you do that, your presence changes, your voice steadies, your yes becomes valuable again. And most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself in small, invisible ways. Take that seriously. Practice it today. Let your next yes be earned. Let your next no be clean. And let your life reflect the quiet strength the Stoics believed was the foundation of all dignity. Number 5, complaining about things you can't control. Complaining about things you can't control is one of the quietest ways you bleed respect, both for yourself and in the eyes of others. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't crash into your life. It seeps in, a sigh here, a repeated grievance there, a mental habit that feels harmless, even justified. But the Stoics warned you about this long before modern life made it fashionable to vent endlessly. Wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Every time you complain about what lies beyond your command, you give that power away. You hand it to chance, to other people, to circumstances that don't even know your name. When you complain, you are saying, without words, that the world should bend to you. That reality is somehow wrong for not aligning with your preferences. And whether you realize it or not, this posture makes you smaller. It trains your mind to react instead of govern. You stop standing upright internally. You become someone who waits for conditions to improve before showing discipline, clarity, or self-respect. The Stoics saw this as a form of self-inflicted weakness. Epictetus was blunt about it. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Complaining is a reaction that demands comfort instead of commanding composure. Real respect comes from self-command, from the sense that you are steady regardless of external noise. When you complain about what you cannot control, you signal that your inner state is hostage to the outer world, that you are governed, not governing. People feel this instinctively. Even if they don't articulate it, they sense when a person has surrendered their authority. And more importantly, you feel it. Each complaint quietly reinforces the belief that you are at the mercy of forces outside yourself. Over time, this erodes your confidence. You start expecting frustration. You rehearse powerlessness. You normalize it. Stoicism never asked you to suppress emotion or pretend difficulties don't exist. It asked something far more demanding: discernment. The discipline to separate what is yours from what is not. Complaining collapses that boundary. It blurs responsibility. It makes you argue with reality instead of aligning with it. And reality never loses that argument. Seneca warned, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Complaining feeds that imagination. It keeps your attention glued to what you dislike, what you fear, what you wish were different. You relive it. You amplify it. You become fluent in dissatisfaction. If you want respect, you must change the relationship you have with adversity, not by denying it, but by refusing to dramatize it internally. The Stoic move is simple but not easy. Acknowledge what is outside your control, then release it. Not with bitterness, not with resignation, with calm clarity. This is where your power returns. When you stop complaining, you don't become passive, you become precise. Your energy stops leaking. Your mind becomes quieter, sharper, more intentional. You can feel this shift the moment you practice it. The urge to complain arises, and instead of indulging it, you pause. You ask yourself one question: is this within my control? If the answer is no, you drop it, not later, now. You redirect your focus to what is yours, your response, your standards, your next action. This is Stoic discipline in motion. This is character being forged in silence. Reminded himself daily, today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence. But none of these can harm me. That wasn't optimism, it was training. To build this habit, you need practice, not motivation. Start with a mental exercise the Stoics used constantly: negative visualization, but done correctly. Briefly acknowledge that events may unfold against your preferences. Don't dwell, don't dramatize, just recognize it. Then tell yourself calmly, this does not touch my character. This trains your nervous system to decouple peace from circumstances. You stop bracing against reality, you stand within it. Another exercise is complaint fasting. Choose a set period, an hour a day, where you commit to zero verbal or mental complaints about things beyond your control. Not about people, not about delays, not about outcomes. When the impulse arises, notice it. Let it pass. This isn't repression, it's redirection. You are teaching your mind that it doesn't need to comment on everything. That silence is an option. Strength grows there. You can also use written reflection, a practice used relentlessly. At the end of the day, write down where you complained internally. Don't judge yourself. Observe. Then write one sentence reframing it through control. What part of this was mine to govern? This builds accountability without self-attack. Over time, your default response shifts. You stop narrating your frustration. You start managing your attention. What happens next is subtle but powerful. You speak less about what bothers you. When you do speak, it's measured. People begin to sense your steadiness. Not because you are louder, but because you are harder to shake. And inside, something even more important happens. You trust yourself more. You no longer fear circumstances as much because you know they don't own you. That trust is the foundation of self-respect. Stoicism teaches you that dignity is not granted by comfort. It is earned through composure. Complaining about what you can't control trains you to expect relief from the outside. Letting go of that habit trains you to generate strength from within. As Epictetus said, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and your life will go smoothly. That smoothness isn't ease, it's alignment. If you take this seriously, your life won't become problem-free, but it will become cleaner, less noise, less internal friction, more direction, and respect, both yours and others, will follow naturally, not because you chased it, but because you stopped sabotaging it. Number 6, gossiping or speaking ill of others. Gossip feels small when it leaves your mouth, almost weightless. Just a comment, just an observation, just words. But the Stoics understood something most people miss. Every word you release is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Warned, what we do now echoes in eternity, and that includes what you say when the person you're talking about isn't there to defend themselves. The moment you speak ill of someone, even subtly, you trade a piece of your authority for momentary relief. You may feel connected, clever, or justified for a few seconds, but beneath that sensation, something erodes. Respect doesn't collapse loudly, it leaks, quietly. And gossip is one of its most efficient solvents. When you speak negatively about others, you signal instability, whether you intend to or not. You teach people around you that your words are conditional, that loyalty bends when emotions shift, that silence can't be trusted. Epictetus reminded us, if you wish to be respected, respect yourself. And that begins with discipline over the tongue. You might think you're exposing flaws in others, but what's actually being revealed is your relationship with impulse. Every time you gossip, you announce that you couldn't hold the line, that you allowed irritation, envy, resentment, or boredom to choose your words for you. And people notice, even if they nod along, even if they laugh, especially then. Stoicism isn't about pretending others are perfect. It's about refusing to outsource your inner state to external behavior. When you gossip, you hand over control. You let someone else's actions dictate your inner climate. Seneca warned against this subtle dependence when he wrote, "A man is as miserable as he believes himself to be." Speaking ill of others keeps your attention trapped outward, scanning for flaws, feeding on judgment. Over time, that habit reshapes your mind. You become sharper at noticing weakness than strength, quicker to criticize than to understand. And that sharpness doesn't turn off when you're alone. It turns inward. The same voice you use on others eventually points at you. There's also a quieter cost. Gossip trains you to seek connection through negativity. Instead of standing grounded in your own values, you bond through shared disapproval. That kind of connection is fragile. It requires a steady supply of targets, and eventually, you become one of them. The Stoics believed character was revealed not in public declarations but in private conduct. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Speaking ill of others keeps you tied to what you claim to rise above. Silence, on the other hand, creates distance. Power needs space. Respect grows where restraint lives. If you want to change this habit, don't start by forcing positivity. That's brittle. Start with awareness. The next time you feel the urge to comment on someone else's flaws, pause and ask yourself a simple Stoic question: is this within my control? The answer is almost always no. Their behavior isn't yours to manage, your response is. That pause is where strength is built, not later, not after reflection. Right there, in the moment where your old pattern asks to be fed and you choose otherwise. A powerful practice the Stoics used was negative visualization, but you can adapt it inwardly. Before speaking, imagine your words circling back to you, not as punishment but as weight. Ask yourself whether those words would strengthen or weaken your presence if repeated in your absence. This isn't about fear, It's about authorship. You are writing your reputation sentence by sentence. Choose lines that hold up under silence. Another exercise is voluntary restraint. For one full day, make it your discipline to speak only about what you admire, what you are working on, or what is neutral and necessary. Not as a performance, as training. Notice the discomfort. Notice how often the urge to comment arises. That urge is information. It shows you where your attention habitually rests. The Stoics believed freedom came from mastering desires, not obeying them. Each resisted impulse strengthens your inner spine. You can also redirect the energy. Gossip often disguises itself as concern or analysis. When that energy surfaces, turn it inward deliberately. Ask, what does this irritation reveal about my expectations? Seneca advised daily self-examination, not as self-criticism, but as refinement. When you shift the lens inward, you reclaim the energy gossip drains. You stop leaking power through commentary and start investing it in self-command. This matters because respect is not demanded, it's felt. People sense when your words are measured, when your silence is intentional, when your presence doesn't depend on tearing something else down. The Stoics didn't aim to control others' opinions, but they understood that dignity is magnetic. When you refuse to gossip, you become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to categorize. You gain gravity. And here's the deeper truth. Gossip keeps you small because it anchors your identity to comparison. Stoicism calls you to a higher game, one where your worth isn't built against others but within yourself. Wrote, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. That includes your speech, especially your speech. You don't need to announce your discipline. Let it show in what you don't say. Let people feel the steadiness of someone who doesn't chase validation through judgment. Each time you choose restraint, you reclaim a fragment of respect, not just from others, but from yourself. And self-respect, the Stoics knew, is the foundation that never cracks. So start now. Watch your words like a guardian, not a censor. Speak when it adds weight. Stay silent when silence preserves strength. Over time, you'll notice something shift. Fewer explanations, less noise, more presence. And with that presence comes a quiet authority that gossip can never offer. Number 7. Lacking discipline in small daily actions. When you lack discipline in the smallest daily actions, respect quietly drains away long before you notice it. Not because anyone announces it, not because someone confronts you, but because disorder always speaks louder than words. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned that, if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters, which is another way of saying that mastery begins with the invisible, boring, uncelebrated moments. You don't lose respect in grand failures. You lose it by letting small promises to yourself collapse again and again. Each time you ignore what you said you would do, something inside you records it. Over time, so do others. And even if no one else ever notices, you do. That inner witness never sleeps. You might think small actions don't matter, that skipping discipline in minor things is harmless. But the Stoic view is clear. Character is built atom by atom. Reminded himself that what we do now echoes in eternity, not because every action is dramatic, but because repetition shapes identity. When you neglect the little things, you train yourself to be someone who negotiates with their own word. That negotiation becomes a habit, then a lifestyle, then a reputation. Respect, both internal and external, grows from alignment. When your actions match your intentions, even in the smallest details, you become solid, predictable, grounded. When they don't, you become fragmented, and fragmentation is felt before it's explained. This isn't about perfection. Stoicism never demanded flawlessness. It demanded seriousness. Seneca wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and that applies here too. The fear of discipline feels heavier than discipline itself. The mind dramatizes effort, exaggerates inconvenience, and whispers that tomorrow will be better. But tomorrow is just another today in disguise. When you delay small disciplines, you reinforce the belief that your impulses outrank your principles. That belief quietly erodes respect, not because discipline makes you impressive, but because lack of it makes you unreliable. And unreliability, even in subtle forms, is corrosive. What's dangerous is how invisible this habit is at first. No alarms go off when you abandon small standards. No immediate consequences arrive. But Stoicism teaches you to look beyond immediacy. Constantly reminded himself to zoom out to see life from above. From that view, you realize that small daily neglect is never small. It compounds. It creates internal chaos, and chaos always leaks outward. People may not know why they trust you less, why your words carry less weight, why your presence doesn't anchor a room the way it could. But the cause is simple. You haven't anchored yourself. If you want to reverse this, you don't need intensity, you need consistency. Discipline in the Stoic sense is not aggression toward yourself, it's stewardship, it's choosing order over mood. Epictetus was blunt. First say to yourself what you would be and then do what you have to do. Not once, not when you feel inspired, but daily, especially when you don't feel like it. Respect is born when your nervous system learns that you follow through regardless of emotional weather. Calm days, heavy days, boring days. You show up the same. That steadiness is rare, and rarity attracts respect. There is something deeply empowering about reclaiming control in small actions. Not flashy control, quiet control, the kind no one applauds. When you practice discipline at this level, you stop needing external validation. You stop negotiating your worth through outcomes. You begin to trust yourself again. That trust changes how you speak, how you move, how you decide. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free," and discipline is a form of bravery. It's the courage to govern yourself without drama, without excuses, without an audience. You don't need to overhaul your life. In fact, trying to do too much at once is another form of undisciplined thinking. Stoicism emphasizes focusing on what is within your control, and your next small action is always within reach. Choose one daily standard that feels almost insultingly simple, something your mind wants to dismiss. Then treat it as sacred, not because it's important in itself, but because you said you would. This is how you retrain self-respect. You don't chase it. You practice it every day. Here's a simple Stoic exercise to anchor this. At the start of the day, state one small commitment clearly in your mind. No embellishment, no negotiation, just a clean promise. Then throughout the day, observe your impulses without obeying them. You're not suppressing them, you're witnessing them. This is classic Stoic discipline, seeing impressions before reacting. At the end of the day, reflect briefly. Not with judgment, with honesty. Did you keep your word? If yes, acknowledge it calmly. If not, note it without drama and reset. Treat self-reflection as maintenance, not punishment. You should too. Another exercise is voluntary discomfort, practiced lightly, not extreme, just enough to remind your mind that comfort is not in charge. The Stoics use this to dissolve fear and dependence. When you choose discipline over ease in small ways, you break the illusion that feelings dictate action. This strengthens something ancient in you, something steady, and that steadiness radiates outward. People trust it instinctively. Understand this: respect is not demanded, it's emitted. And what you emit comes from who you are when no one is watching. Lacking discipline in small daily actions tells the world and yourself that your word is flexible, that your standards are negotiable, that comfort has veto power. Discipline reverses that message without a single speech. It makes your presence heavier, calmer, more grounded. You don't need to announce it, you become it. So don't wait for motivation. Stoicism never did. Act first. Let feeling catch up later. Start where you are, start small, start today. The moment you stop breaking tiny promises to yourself is the moment respect begins to return, quietly, steadily, and permanently. Number 8. Breaking your word, even in minor matters. When you break your word, even in the smallest, quietest ways, something inside you fractures long before anyone else notices. You may think it doesn't matter. You may tell yourself it was minor, forgettable, harmless. But the Stoics understood something most people ignore. Character is not revealed in grand moments, it is exposed in private inconsistencies. Warned, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Your word is where that begins. Every promise you make is a mirror. Every time you fail to honor it, you teach yourself, slowly, subtly, that your own commitments are flexible. And once that lesson sinks in, respect begins to leak out of your life like air from a cracked vessel. You don't lose respect overnight. You erode it, bit by bit. Each time you say you'll do something and don't follow through, you signal to your own mind that your intentions are negotiable. This isn't about morality in a dramatic sense. It's about internal alignment. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." When your words and actions drift apart, you live in quiet contradiction. Others feel it before they can name it. You feel it as hesitation, self-doubt, and a strange lack of weight behind your voice. People may still listen to you, but they stop believing in you. Worse, you stop believing in yourself. Breaking your word weakens your presence, not loudly, not visibly, but perceptibly. You become someone who explains instead of someone who stands, someone who compensates with talk because action no longer speaks for you. The Stoics placed enormous value on integrity because they saw it as the foundation of inner freedom. If you cannot trust yourself, how can you expect to remain steady when pressure arrives? Seneca wrote, "What progress, you ask, have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself." Friendship with yourself begins with reliability, with doing what you said you would do, especially when no one is watching. Here's the uncomfortable truth you may resist at first. The size of the promise doesn't matter. Your nervous system doesn't measure scale. It only registers consistency. When you break your word in minor matters, you train yourself to delay, excuse, rationalize. You normalize avoidance. Over time, this becomes a habit, and habits quietly sculpt identity. You don't wake up one day as someone others don't respect. You rehearse it, repeatedly, through small betrayals of your own standards. Stoicism asks you to live deliberately, to act with intention rather than impulse. When you give your word casually, you cheapen it. When you keep it faithfully, you strengthen it. This is not about becoming rigid or severe. It's about becoming precise, speak less, promise less. But when you commit, internally or externally, stand by it. Reminded himself, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Respect grows in the space between restraint and follow-through. You don't need approval to rebuild this habit. You don't need validation. You need discipline. Start by noticing how often you speak without intention, how often you agree out of convenience, how often you reassure without planning to act. Awareness is the first exercise. For the next few days, slow your speech. Before you say, "I will," pause, ask yourself if you are willing to carry the weight of that statement. If not, don't say it. Silence is not weakness, it is accuracy. Then practice alignment in solitude. Make one small promise to yourself each day and honor it without negotiation. No bargaining, no excuses. This trains the muscle of self-trust. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from mastery of the self, not control over outcomes. When you keep your word to yourself, you reclaim authority over your actions. You stop being reactive. You become grounded. Another exercise. Review your day each night as the Stoics did. Ask yourself, not harshly but honestly, where your words and actions matched and where they diverged. This isn't for guilt, it's for calibration. Seneca believed reflection sharpened virtue. Each honest review tightens the gap between intention and behavior. As you rebuild this habit, something subtle but powerful happens. Your words gain gravity. You speak less, but what you say lands. You no longer need to convince or perform. People sense coherence. Respect returns, not because you demand it, but because consistency commands it. This is not about perfection. You will stumble. What matters is correction. When you fail to keep your word, acknowledge it fully. Not with excuses, not with stories, with responsibility. That alone restores more respect than empty apologies ever could. Stoicism is not about pretending to be flawless. It's about refusing to live in self-deception. You don't need to change your personality. You need to tighten your standards. Your word is a contract with reality. Honor it and you become reliable. Break it and everything else you try to build stands on unstable ground. Choose carefully, speak deliberately, act decisively. Respect is not something you chase. It is something you earn, quietly, consistently, every time you do exactly what you said you would do. Number 9, needing to be liked by everyone. Needing to be liked by everyone is one of the quietest ways you give your power away, and most people don't even notice it happening. It doesn't feel like weakness at first. It feels polite. It feels kind. It feels socially intelligent. But beneath that surface, something corrosive is forming. The Stoics warned against this long before social approval became a currency. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That line isn't poetic comfort. It's a warning. The moment you organize your behavior around how others perceive you, you stop living by principle and start living by reaction. You begin outsourcing your self-worth. And once that happens, respect, both self-respect and the respect of others, slowly erodes. When you need everyone to like you, your words lose weight. You soften truths before they even leave your mouth. You hesitate. You adjust your tone not based on what is right, but on what is safe. Over time, you train yourself to scan rooms instead of your conscience. Wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Read that again. If your internal compass is constantly by external approval, your character becomes flexible. And flexible character is unreliable. People sense this instinctively. Respect doesn't come from being agreeable, it comes from being grounded. When you're always trying to be liked, you become predictable, and predictability without conviction invites dismissal. There's also a deeper cost that rarely gets discussed. The habit of people-pleasing fractures your inner life. You start feeling tension between what you think and what you say, between what you want and what you allow. That tension drains energy. Seneca warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If your emotional state rises and falls with approval or disapproval, you're not in control. You're managed. And nothing kills respect faster than emotional dependency disguised as kindness. Calm strength doesn't ask to be liked. It doesn't negotiate its existence. It simply is. You may tell yourself that being liked keeps the peace, but peace built on self-erasure never lasts. Over time, resentment builds even if you don't consciously notice it. You feel overlooked, underappreciated, invisible, and that resentment leaks out in subtle ways: passive compliance, internal withdrawal, quiet bitterness. The Stoics believed harmony comes from alignment with virtue, not with applause. Epictetus made this clear. If you seek truth, you will not seek victory by dishonorable means. Approval seeking is one of those dishonorable shortcuts. It trades integrity for comfort. And comfort, when it becomes the goal, dulls the edge of your character. Respect requires friction, not constant conflict, but the willingness to stand firm when your values are tested. If everyone likes you, it's often because you've made yourself small enough to fit into their expectations. But smaller versions of you don't inspire trust. They don't inspire admiration. They inspire convenience. Stoicism teaches that your task is not to be liked, but to be aligned, with reason, with virtue, with self-command. Reminded himself daily, "I must not feel harmed, and I haven't been." That mindset breaks the addiction to approval. When you stop interpreting disapproval as damage, you regain freedom. Here, where action begins. Start by practicing deliberate emotional restraint. When you feel the impulse to seek validation, pause. Don't correct it immediately, just notice it. Ask yourself quietly, am I about to speak to be honest or to be liked? That single question can interrupt years of conditioning. The Stoics believed awareness precedes discipline. Without awareness, habits rule you. With it, habits become choices. Another exercise is intentional silence, not avoidance. Silence with presence. When you feel pressure to fill space to maintain approval, resist it. Let pauses exist. Let others sit with uncertainty. Seneca wrote, "He who knows how to be content will always have enough." Silence signals sufficiency. It communicates that you don't need constant affirmation to exist comfortably. Over time, this changes how others respond to you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. You should also train yourself to accept mild disapproval daily. This isn't self-punishment, it's conditioning. Choose not to explain yourself when you normally would. Choose not to over-justify. Choose not to smooth every edge. Let misunderstanding occur without rushing to repair it. Epictetus advised, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Other people's opinions are not in your power. Your conduct is. Respect grows when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable. Another powerful practice is internal validation journaling. At the end of the day, don't ask whether you were liked. Ask whether you were consistent. Did your actions match your principles? Did you speak when it mattered? Did you hold your line calmly? Didn't end his days with applause metrics. He ended them with self-audits. That habit builds an internal authority that no external opinion can override. Needing to be liked also blurs your boundaries. Stoicism is clear on this. Boundaries protect virtue. Seneca warned, associate with people who are likely to improve you. When you need universal approval, you associate indiscriminately. You dilute your standards, and diluted standards lead to diluted respect. You don't need to harden yourself. You need to clarify yourself. There's a difference. Calm firmness is not cruelty, it's clarity. The shift you're aiming for isn't becoming cold or distant, it's becoming anchored. When you stop chasing approval, your energy returns. Your words slow down, your presence steadies. People may not always like you, but they will feel something stronger. Reliability, gravity, self-possession. These are Stoic virtues in motion. Remember this, respect follows those who don't beg for emotional permission to exist. The Stoics didn't teach isolation. They taught independence of judgment. When you reclaim that, you don't lose connection, you purify it. You stop performing, you start standing. So take action. Today, choose one moment where you act without checking the room. One moment where you trust your reason over reaction. One moment where you let approval go unanswered. These small acts compound. Over time, you'll notice something profound. The less you need to be liked, the more seriously you're taken. And even more important, the more solid you feel within yourself. Number 10, abandoning your principles for short-term comfort. Abandoning your principles for short-term comfort is one of the quietest ways you lose respect, first from yourself and then from everyone else. It doesn't happen loudly. There's no dramatic collapse. It happens in small moments where you choose ease over alignment, relief over integrity, silence over truth. And each time you do, something inside you weakens. Warned, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That sentence isn't poetic decoration. It's a command. Because the moment you start negotiating with your principles, you teach yourself that they are optional. And once your own word stops carrying weight with you, nothing you say or do feels solid anymore. You feel this erosion long before others notice it. You sense it when you justify decisions you know don't sit right. When you tell yourself, just this once, just for now, it's easier this way. Comfort becomes your compass, and principles become something you reference only when it's convenient. The Stoics were ruthless about this. Epictetus made it clear that character is revealed not in comfort, but in pressure. When comfort becomes the priority, you stop training your character. You stop sharpening your edge. You start drifting. And drift is dangerous because it feels harmless while it's happening. Short-term comfort always asks the same price, a small betrayal of who you know you should be. That price compounds. Each compromise makes the next one easier. You don't wake up one day without values, you slowly starve them. And the cost is respect. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something that radiates naturally when your actions are consistent with your inner code. When people sense that you bend depending on circumstances, they may not articulate it, but they feel it. And once that feeling sets in, your presence loses gravity. The Stoics didn't preach rigid morality for appearances. They understood something deeper. Inner coherence creates strength. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here doesn't mean loud defiance. It means the quiet courage to endure discomfort without abandoning yourself. When you choose principle over comfort, you may feel tension, but you also feel clean. There's a steadiness that comes from knowing you didn't sell your values for temporary relief. That steadiness becomes visible. It changes how you speak, how you stand, how you decide. People respond to that even if they don't consciously know why. If you're honest, you already know where you've been trading alignment for ease. The Stoics would tell you not to beat yourself up for it, but also not to lie to yourself. Self-respect begins with clear sight. Constantly reminded himself to examine his own conduct without excuses. That's where your work starts, not with grand declarations, but with awareness. Notice when your mind reaches for comfort as an escape. Notice how fast it tries to rationalize. That moment of noticing is power. It's the space where you can choose differently. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop asking what feels easiest right now, and start asking what aligns with the person I claim to be. That question changes everything. It slows you down, it interrupts impulse. It forces you to live deliberately. The Stoics believe that a good life is built moment by moment through conscious choice. Not dramatic sacrifices, consistent alignment. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be honest and firm. There's a simple practice you can adopt starting today. At the end of each day, do what Seneca advised, review your actions. Ask yourself where you acted in accordance with your principles and where you abandoned them for comfort. Don't judge, just record. This reflection sharpens your internal compass. Over time, you'll start catching yourself earlier, sometimes right in the moment. That's progress. That's strength returning. Another exercise is pre-commitment. Decide your principles before pressure appears. Write them down if you need to. When the moment of discomfort arrives, you won't have to negotiate. You'll already know your answer. Epictetus emphasized this discipline repeatedly. Prepare your mind in advance. A prepared mind doesn't panic when comfort is threatened. It stays anchored. And anchoring yourself is how respect is rebuilt. You also need to retrain your relationship with discomfort. The Stoics didn't avoid it, they used it. Discomfort is feedback. It tells you where growth is required. When you flee it, you remain the same. When you face it without betraying yourself, you expand. Remind yourself that comfort is temporary, but character is cumulative. Every time you choose principle, even when it costs you ease, you reinforce the kind of person you are becoming. This isn't about becoming rigid or cold. It's about becoming reliable to yourself first. When you know you won't abandon your values for convenience, your confidence stabilizes. You stop over-explaining. You stop seeking validation. Your actions speak with clarity. Put it simply, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Being one requires friction. It requires saying no to the seductive pull of comfort when it conflicts with who you are. Take action now. Identify one principle you've been compromising, just one. Decide today that the next time it's tested, you will hold it even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. That moment will matter more than you think. Respect is rebuilt in these quiet, unseen decisions. And the more often you choose alignment over relief, the stronger and calmer you become. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to prove anything. You need to stop abandoning yourself. When you do, respect follows naturally, internally first, externally second. That is Stoic strength. That is how you reclaim your center. Before you go, remember this. Respect is not demanded, it is demonstrated. The Stoics taught that your power is not in controlling how others see you, but in mastering how you carry yourself when no one is applauding. Every habit we discuss today quietly shapes the way the world responds to you. Some elevate you without words, others silently erode your presence. Warn that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The same is true of your actions. What you tolerate, what you chase, what you react to, these things train people how to treat you. The moment you stop abandoning your standards for approval, something changes. Your silence gains weight. Your words gain value. Your presence becomes undeniable. If even one habit in this video made you pause, that's your signal. Awareness is the first act of discipline. Correction is the second. Respect is the reward. If this video helped you see yourself more clearly, make sure you like it, share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe for more Stoic wisdom that sharpens your character and strengthens your presence. And remember, a Stoic does not beg for respect. He lives in a way that makes disrespect impossible. You always own the option of having no opinion. What if I told you that the most powerful way to deal with arrogant people isn't by overpowering them, proving them wrong, or matching their ego, but by staying calm, silent, and choosing your words with precision? You've been there. Someone talks down to you, interrupts you, tries to assert dominance in subtle ways, and in that moment your mind races. Should I respond? Should I defend myself? Should I put them in their place? Stoicism offers a different path, a smarter one, not loud, not aggressive, but deeply unsettling to those who rely on arrogance for control. The Stoics understood something most people still miss today. Real power lies in emotional mastery, not emotional reaction. When you stop feeding arrogance with attention, it collapses on itself. In this video, you'll learn 10 powerful Stoic phrases, simple, calm, and razor-sharp, that instantly disarm arrogant people without escalating conflict or sacrificing your dignity. These are not insults. They are not comebacks. They are psychological tools rooted in ancient Stoic wisdom and timeless human nature. Watch this video till the very end, because the final phrases are the most subtle and the most devastating. Master them, and you'll never feel intimidated, disrespected, or mentally cornered again. Number 1, you may be right. At first glance, this phrase feels small, almost dismissive, too soft. Your ego might even resist it because you've been conditioned to believe that power comes from proving, correcting, winning. But Stoicism teaches you something radically different. Real power comes from not needing to win every exchange. Wrote, "It is the privilege of a man to love even those who stumble." When you say you may be right, you are not surrendering your position. You are stepping out of a pointless battlefield altogether. And that is what disarms arrogance. Arrogant people feed on resistance. They need friction. They need you to push back so they can push harder. This phrase denies them that fuel. When you say you may be right, you are practicing voluntary non-attachment. You are showing that your identity is not welded to being correct. Epictetus warned, if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. Read that again. He's not telling you to be clueless. He's telling you to stop tying your worth to external validation. Arrogance collapses in the presence of someone who doesn't need approval, dominance, or applause. The phrase works because it communicates something unspoken but unmistakable. I am not threatened by your certainty. And that quiet confidence rattles people more than confrontation ever could. Notice what happens internally when you use this phrase. Your body relaxes, your breathing slows, you step back into control of yourself. Stoicism is never about controlling others, it's about ruling your inner world. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." You may be right creates that delay. It interrupts the automatic urge to defend, argue, or posture. And in that pause, you reclaim authority over your emotions. You stop reacting. You start choosing. That alone puts you in a higher position than anyone driven by ego. Here's the paradox you need to understand. Saying you may be right doesn't mean the other person is right. It means you're no longer invested in proving them wrong. You're allowing space for uncertainty. And uncertainty is terrifying for arrogant people because their identity depends on certainty. They speak in absolutes. You respond with calm openness. They escalate. You remain grounded. That imbalance shifts the power dynamic immediately. Not because you outplayed them, but because you refuse to play at all. You must practice this deliberately, not as a tactic but as a discipline. The Stoics trained themselves daily to loosen their grip on ego, reminded himself, "I may be mistaken." Imagine the emperor of Rome writing that to himself. That humility was not weakness, it was armor. When you adopt the same mindset, arrogance loses its leverage over you. You no longer feel compelled to correct every falsehood or challenge every inflated claim. You become selective with your energy. And selection is strength. To internalize this phrase, begin with a simple exercise. Each day, notice moments when your instinct is to interrupt, correct, or assert superiority, even silently. Instead of acting on that impulse, repeat internally, "You may be right." Not out loud at first, just inside your mind. Feel the release. Feel how quickly the tension dissolves. This is how you retrain yourself to respond instead of react. Over time, you'll find it easier to say the words aloud calmly without edge or sarcasm. Tone matters. This phrase only works when it's delivered without bitterness. Say it as a statement of inner stability, not passive aggression. Another practice, journal at the end of the day. Ask yourself one question: where did my need to be right cost me peace today? You'll start seeing patterns. You'll realize how often ego disguises itself as principle or logic. The Stoics were ruthless about exposing these illusions within themselves. You should be too, because every time you let go of the need to dominate a conversation, you strengthen your self-command. Remember, Stoicism is not about silencing yourself. It's about choosing when your voice truly matters. "You may be right" is not retreat, it's strategic restraint. It signals that your confidence is internal, not dependent on external agreement. And that kind of confidence is rare. People feel it immediately. They may not like it, but they will sense it. Arrogance can't coexist with someone who is calm, centered, and unattached. Make this phrase part of your identity. Use it not just with others, but with yourself. When your own mind spirals into rigid certainty, whisper it inwardly. You may be right or you may not. Either way, your peace doesn't depend on it. That is Stoic power. Quiet, grounded, unshakable. Number 2, I don't need to prove myself. On the surface, it sounds simple, almost too simple. But if you sit with it for a moment, you'll realize this sentence carries the quiet force of a mountain. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It doesn't compete. It stands. And when you truly embody it, arrogant people lose their power over you without you lifting a finger. Wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That single line captures the soul of this phrase. You don't need to perform goodness, intelligence, dominance, or worth. You don't need applause as proof of value. The moment you feel compelled to prove yourself, you've already handed control to someone else. You've allowed their opinion to sit in judgment over your inner world. Stoicism teaches you to reclaim that authority. Arrogant people thrive on reaction. They provoke, posture, interrupt, exaggerate, dismiss. Not because they are strong, but because they are starving. They need resistance so they can push against it. They need validation so they can feel solid. When you say, internally and externally, I don't need to prove myself, you deny them their fuel. You don't oppose them. You don't submit either. You simply step out of the game entirely. And nothing unsettles arrogance more than irrelevance. This phrase isn't about arrogance of your own. It's not about superiority or indifference masquerading as strength. It's about self-containment. Epictetus put it plainly. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Read that again. He wasn't saying you are foolish. He was saying your peace is worth more than your reputation. The need to prove yourself is a form of bondage. The absence of that need is freedom. You've been conditioned subtly and constantly to explain yourself, to justify your choices, to defend your boundaries, to present credentials for your worth. Stoicism asks you to pause and question that impulse. Who are you trying to convince? And why do they deserve that effort? When you no longer feel the urge to prove, you start moving differently. Your words slow down. Your reactions soften. Your presence deepens. Silence stops feeling like weakness and starts feeling like strength. I don't need to prove myself disarms arrogance because it removes the battlefield. There's no argument to win, no hierarchy to climb, no contest to dominate. Arrogant people are often trapped in comparison. Stoics refuse that trap. Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here doesn't look loud. It looks like restraint. It looks like choosing not to perform when performance is expected. It looks like knowing who you are without needing witnesses. This phrase also rewires how you relate to yourself. Every time you resist the urge to justify, to seek approval, you strengthen an inner muscle. You begin to trust your own judgment. You stop outsourcing your self-respect. You stop measuring your worth by how well you're perceived. That's not withdrawal from the world. That's grounding yourself so deeply that the world can't shake you. There's a calm confidence that emerges when you live this way, not the kind that announces itself, the kind that settles into your posture, your tone, your timing. You stop rushing to speak. You stop correcting people who misunderstand you. You stop chasing clarity from those committed to confusion. And paradoxically, this makes your words carry more weight, not less. People sense when someone isn't trying to impress them. It creates gravity. But this mindset doesn't arrive overnight. It's trained, practiced, chosen repeatedly, especially in moments when your ego flares up and demands recognition. That's where Stoic discipline comes in. Reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The urge to prove yourself is an internal event, which means you can master it. Here's a simple daily exercise. When you feel the impulse to explain, pause, breathe once, ask yourself, what happens if I say nothing? Not as avoidance, but as experimentation. Let the silence sit. Feel the discomfort without rushing to soothe it. Over time, you'll notice the discomfort fades faster. Your nervous system learns that you are safe even without validation. That's real progress. Another practice, write down the moments where you felt the strongest need to prove yourself. Don't judge them, just observe. Then ask, what was I afraid would happen if I did? Often, you'll find the fear is imaginary, inherited, or outdated. Seeing it clearly weakens its grip. You can also rehearse the phrase internally, not as a defense but as an anchor. When provoked, repeat to yourself, I don't need to prove myself. Let it slow your heartbeat. Let it relax your jaw. Let it remind you that your worth is not under review. The more you do this, the more natural it becomes. Stoicism doesn't promise that arrogant people will disappear. It promises that they will lose access to your inner peace. And that is a far greater victory. You stop engaging in invisible competitions. You stop auditioning for respect. You start living from a place of settled self-trust. Seneca said, the greatest power is to have no need of power. That's the quiet truth behind this phrase. When you don't need to prove yourself, you don't need to dominate, impress, or outshine. You simply are. And in that state, arrogance has nothing to push against. So take this phrase seriously, not as a line to say, but as a principle to live. Practice withholding explanation. Practice letting misunderstanding exist. Practice choosing inner approval over outer applause. You'll notice a shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Your energy stays with you. Your dignity becomes unshakable. And without confrontation, without noise, without effort, you disarm arrogance at its root. Start today. The next time your ego leans forward, lean back instead. The next time you want to prove, choose to be. That's Stoic strength. Number 3, that's your perspective. At first glance, it sounds simple, almost casual, but when spoken with calm clarity, it carries a quiet authority that arrogant people struggle to penetrate. This phrase does something powerful without force. It refuses the trap of argument. It declines the invitation to wrestle egos. And most importantly, it places you firmly back in control of your inner state. You're no longer reacting. You're choosing. Epictetus warned you long ago that it is not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about things. When you say, that's your perspective, you're acknowledging exactly that. You're recognizing that what's being presented to you is not absolute truth, but a personal interpretation, filtered through biases, emotions, insecurities, and assumptions, and you don't have to carry it. Arrogant people feed on resistance. They want your tension, your justification, your emotional energy. They want you to defend yourself so they can feel superior. But this phrase starves them. You're not agreeing. You're not disagreeing. You're simply numbing reality. You're drawing a clean boundary between what belongs to them and what belongs to you. Wrote, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. This is exactly what happens when you adopt this phrase as a habit. You stop internalizing opinions that were never meant to guide your life. You stop letting someone else's certainty shake your calm. Notice how this phrase shifts your posture internally. You're no longer shrinking or bracing yourself. You're standing still, grounded, observant. There's a quiet confidence in recognizing that multiple perspectives can exist without requiring your submission to any of them. Arrogance thrives on the illusion of dominance, on the belief that one voice must overpower another. But Stoicism teaches you something different. Strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't argue unnecessarily. Seneca said, "The greatest power is to be unassailable." When you say, that's your perspective, you become exactly that, unassailable. There's nothing to grab onto, no emotional hook, no exposed nerve. This phrase also trains you in a deeper Stoic discipline, separating judgment from identity. When someone speaks arrogantly, they often present their view as unquestionable truth. If you absorb it, you begin to doubt yourself. If you fight it, you become entangled. But when you calmly label it as perspective, you step outside the emotional fog. You're practicing what the Stoics called assent, deciding which impressions deserve your acceptance. Not every opinion earns a seat in your mind. You are allowed to observe without absorbing. You are allowed to hear without carrying. This is not passivity, it's discernment. Say it slowly in your mind, that's your perspective. Feel the space it creates. It gives you room to breathe, room to think, room to remain composed. Arrogant people hate space because space removes their leverage. They rely on urgency, pressure, and emotional imbalance. You're learning to deny them all three. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. You stop feeling the need to explain yourself. You stop chasing validation. You stop proving. As Epictetus reminded you, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. You don't need to win the moment. You need to preserve your character. There's another layer here, and it's subtle. When you say this phrase with sincerity, not sarcasm, you're also practicing humility. You're acknowledging that perspectives exist without declaring yourself superior. That's what makes it so disarming. Arrogance expects either submission or resistance. Calm acknowledgement confuses it. You're not inflating yourself. You're not diminishing them. You're simply standing in your own center. This is the kind of confidence that doesn't seek applause. It's inward-facing, stable, quiet, and incredibly hard to shake. Now let's turn this into a habit rather than a clever line. Start by training your awareness. Each day, notice how often opinions are presented as facts by others and by your own mind. When you catch one, pause. Silently say, "That's a perspective." Do this especially with thoughts that trigger irritation or self-doubt. You're practicing mental distance. You're reminding yourself that impressions are not commands. This alone will sharpen your emotional discipline faster than most techniques. Next, rehearse the phrase internally. You don't need to say it out loud to benefit from it. Imagine situations where your calm might be tested, not to relive them but to rehearse composure. Visualize yourself staying steady, breathing evenly, and responding with restraint. Often wrote to himself for this exact reason. He wasn't performing Stoicism. He was practicing it. You're doing the same. Another exercise is restraint training. For one full day, commit to not correcting opinions that don't require correction. Every time you feel the urge to argue, label it silently, urge to control. Then release it. This builds tolerance for discomfort and strengthens your self-mastery. Seneca believed that voluntary discomfort sharpened the mind and steadied the soul. This is a modern form of that discipline. Over time, you'll notice something shift. Arrogant energy stops sticking to you. Conversations feel lighter. Your responses become slower, more intentional. And most importantly, you begin to trust yourself more. You no longer need to win debates to feel secure. You no longer outsource your peace. You understand deeply that your serenity is worth more than being right. That's your perspective is not about silencing others. It's about freeing yourself. It's a reminder that you are not obligated to carry every opinion that crosses your path. You choose what shapes you. You choose what enters your inner world. And when you choose calm over conflict, clarity over chaos, you embody the Stoic ideal without saying a word. Take this phrase seriously. Practice it. Live it. Let it become part of how you move through the world, steady, composed, and untouchable. Number 4, I'm comfortable with my decision. On the surface, it sounds simple, almost plain. But when spoken with calm certainty, this phrase carries a quiet authority that arrogant people can't grip, twist, or overpower. You're not asking for permission. You're not defending yourself. You're not inviting debate. You're standing where you are, grounded, unmoved, and at peace with your own judgment. That alone is deeply unsettling to those who rely on dominance, pressure, or intimidation to feel superior. As wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. This phrase announces that your estimate is settled, and when your mind is settled, arrogance has nowhere to land. When you say you're comfortable with your decision, you're practicing one of the most difficult Stoic disciplines, refusing to outsource your inner authority. Arrogant people thrive on doubt. They sense hesitation the way a predator senses imbalance. They push, poke, question, and provoke, not because they seek truth, but because they want control. Your calm refusal to re-enter the arena denies them oxygen. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Comfort with your decision means you've already accepted that not everyone will agree, approve, or applaud, and you no longer need them to. Notice how this phrase doesn't attack, it doesn't explain, it doesn't justify, it simply closes the loop. That's why it disarms. Arrogance expects resistance or submission. It's prepared to argue or dominate. What it's not prepared for is quiet finality. You're not saying you're right. You're not saying they're wrong. You're saying your inner court has already ruled. That composure reflects what Seneca called true strength. He is powerful who has himself in his own power. You're demonstrating self-possession. And self-possession is intimidating to anyone who depends on external leverage. This phrase also trains you to detach from the need to be understood. That's a subtle but life-changing shift. You may feel the pull to explain yourself, to lay out reasons, to make your logic airtight so no one can challenge it. But Stoicism reminds you that clarity of conscience matters more than clarity of argument. Advised, never explain yourself. Your friends don't need it, and your enemies won't believe it. When you're comfortable with your decision, you stop performing your life for an audience. You act from principle, not applause. There's a deeper layer here too. Saying this phrase isn't about stubbornness, it's about alignment. You've weighed your values, you've listened inwardly, you've chosen deliberately. That's why you can stand calmly afterward. Arrogant people often mistake volume for certainty. They speak loudly because they are unsure. Your quiet certainty exposes that contrast without ever pointing it out. And that's why it works. As Epictetus put it, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. This phrase is embodiment. To make this phrase truly yours, you need to build the inner structure that supports it. Comfort doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's cultivated. One practical exercise is daily voluntary stillness. Sit quietly for a few minutes each day and review one decision you've made, not to judge it, but to reaffirm it. Ask yourself whether it aligns with your values, not whether it pleased others. If it does, let your mind rest there. This trains your nervous system to associate decision-making with calm, instead of anxiety. Another exercise is what the Stoics called but applied inwardly. Before making decisions, briefly imagine that others will disagree, criticize, or mock. Then decide anyway from principle. When those reactions actually occur, your mind recognizes them as familiar, already accepted. Comfort follows naturally. You're no longer startled by opposition. You anticipated it, and you chose your path regardless. You can also practice silent repetition. When you feel the urge to explain yourself internally, repeat the phrase in your mind, "I'm comfortable with my decision." Let it become an anchor. Not a shield, not a weapon, an anchor. Over time, this repetition rewires your reflexes. Instead of reacting outwardly, you settle inwardly. That's Stoic mastery in motion. It's important to understand that comfort doesn't mean emotional numbness. It means emotional sovereignty. You still feel, you still care, but you're no longer dragged around by the opinions of those who confuse dominance with wisdom. Seneca reminded us, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Every time you choose comfort over compulsion, you reclaim a piece of that freedom. As you continue using this phrase, you'll notice something subtle shift. Arrogant people lose interest. They can't escalate. They can't hook you into endless back and forth. Your calm becomes a mirror they don't want to look into. And more importantly, your self-respect grows. You begin trusting yourself more deeply, not because you're always right, but because you're honest with your own reasoning. So adopt this phrase as a practice, not a performance. Let it be backed by reflection, values, and restraint. Say it when your mind is clear, not heated. Say it slowly, not defensively. And even when you don't say it out loud, let it shape your posture, your tone, your stillness. Captured it perfectly. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Comfort with your decision is the outward sign of inner order. Build that order, protect it, and arrogance will dissolve on its own, without a single argument spoken. Number 5, I won't engage in this. At first glance, it sounds simple, almost too simple. But when you slow down and really feel the weight of that sentence, you realize it carries an unusual kind of power. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't argue, doesn't need approval. It's a quiet refusal to be pulled into someone else's chaos. And that refusal, when rooted in Stoic discipline, can disarm arrogance more effectively than any clever comeback ever could. Arrogant people thrive on reaction. They feed on friction, on emotional spikes, on the sense that they've managed to provoke something in you. That's their currency. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. When you say, "I won't engage in this," you're doing more than ending a conversation. You're reclaiming ownership of your inner state. You're declaring that your attention, your emotions, your mental energy are not available for misuse. And that declaration shifts the entire dynamic. This phrase works because it's not defensive. You're not explaining yourself. You're not justifying your boundary. You're not asking for permission. You're stating a decision. Wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion." Engagement is a choice, not an obligation. Arrogant people assume you owe them a response, a reaction, a submission to their frame. This phrase quietly dismantles that assumption. It denies them the stage they believe they deserve. What makes "I won't engage in this" especially powerful is that it aligns with the Stoic principle of focusing only on what is within your control. You can't control someone else's ego, tone, or intent, but you can control whether you participate. Seneca said, "No one can hurt you without your consent." Engagement is often that consent. When you withdraw it, the power structure collapses. There's nothing left for arrogance to push against. Notice how this phrase protects your dignity. You're not lowering yourself to match their energy. You're not trying to dominate or win. You're stepping out entirely. That's why it feels unsettling to arrogant people. They expect opposition or submission, never indifference grounded in self-command. Your calm refusal exposes the emptiness of their performance. Now here's the deeper layer most people miss. Saying, "I won't engage in this" isn't just something you say outwardly. It's a stance you adopt internally first. Before it ever leaves your mouth, it becomes a decision in your mind. A decision that says, "I value my peace more than being right. I value my time more than proving a point. I value my self-respect more than temporary emotional release." This internal alignment is what gives the phrase its force. Without that alignment, the words feel hollow. With it, they become immovable. The Stoics trained themselves daily to pause before reacting, to create space between stimulus and response. This phrase lives in that space. It's the verbal expression of restraint. And restraint, contrary to modern belief, is not weakness, it's mastery. Reminded himself, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. When you refuse to engage, you're refusing to mirror arrogance back to itself. You're choosing a higher altitude. There's also something deeply liberating about realizing you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to correct every misconception. You don't have to defend your worth. Arrogant people often bait you into debates not to seek truth, but to assert dominance. When you disengage, you deny them that illusion of superiority, and you do it without hostility. This is why the phrase must be delivered, internally and externally, with calm finality. Not anger, not sarcasm, just certainty. Stoicism teaches that emotional excess is a sign of misplaced judgment. So when you adopt this phrase, you're practicing emotional economy. You're conserving energy for things that actually matter. And over time, that habit reshapes how others perceive you. People sense when someone is unmovable, not because they are rigid, but because they are grounded. To make this principle part of who you are, you need practice. Start with a daily mental rehearsal. Each morning, remind yourself, I am not required to engage with disrespect, provocation, or ego. Visualize yourself choosing silence, choosing withdrawal, choosing composure. This is straight from Stoic premeditation, anticipating challenges before they arrive so you're not caught off guard. Another exercise is emotional labeling. When you feel the urge to engage, silently name what's happening. This is irritation. This is ego. This is the desire to win. By numbing it, you weaken its grip. Epictetus taught that emotions are judgments, not facts. Once you see them clearly, you're free to choose differently. You can also practice voluntary disengagement in low-stakes moments. Not everything requires your input. Train yourself to let conversations end without resolution. Let silence do the work. This builds the muscle of non-attachment. Over time, saying, "I won't engage in this," becomes less of a strategy and more of a natural response. The real transformation happens when you realize this phrase isn't about the other person at all. It's about you. It's about refusing to outsource your emotional regulation. It's about living in accordance with reason, not impulse. Stoicism was never about suppressing emotion. It was about governing it. And this phrase is a clear expression of that governance. Remember what wrote in his private journal. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. You can extend that wisdom further. If it does not serve your character, do not engage in it. Every time you choose restraint, you reinforce your identity as someone who cannot be easily shaken. So the next time you feel that familiar pull, the urge to argue, to correct, to defend, pause, breathe, ground yourself, and choose the higher path. Say it if you need to, or simply live it. I won't engage in this. Not out of fear, not out of avoidance, but out of strength, out of self-respect, out of stoic clarity. Number 6, think whatever you like. On the surface, it sounds dismissive, almost careless. But in the hands of someone grounded in stoic discipline, this phrase is anything but weak. It is quiet authority. It is emotional sovereignty. It is the moment you stop wrestling with arrogance and step out of the arena entirely. And that is precisely why it disarms. You need to understand this first. Arrogant people feed on reaction. They crave resistance, correction, explanation, defense. They want you to prove something to them, to yourself, to the room. The moment you feel the urge to justify, you've already handed them leverage. Epictetus warned you about this long ago when he said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" The Stoic response is not correction. It is detachment. Think whatever you like is not resignation. It is refusal. You are refusing to participate in a game that offers no reward. You are signaling, without hostility, without tension, that their opinion has no jurisdiction over your inner state. Wrote, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." When you say this phrase and mean it, you reverse that mistake. You choose self-command over social approval. Say it calmly, not sharply, not sarcastically. Calm is essential. Calm communicates that you are not overwhelmed, not threatened, not scrambling for control. Calm tells the other person that their arrogance has failed to land. You are not rejecting them. You are rejecting the need to manage their perception. And that distinction is powerful. This phrase works because it draws a boundary without drawing a line in the sand. There is no escalation, no argument to win, no ego to defend. You are simply stepping back into yourself. Seneca put it perfectly, "He who is brave is free." Freedom here means freedom from the compulsion to correct every wrong thought spoken aloud. Freedom from the reflex to explain yourself to someone who isn't listening anyway. You must also understand what this phrase is not. It is not passive-aggressive silence. It is not bitterness disguised as calm. It is not emotional shutdown. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotion, it's about governing it. When you say think whatever you like, you are actively choosing where your energy goes. You are practicing selective engagement. That is maturity. Arrogant people often mistake silence or non-engagement for weakness. Let them. That misunderstanding is part of their blindness. As reminded himself, begin the morning by saying to thyself, "I shall meet with busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial." The Stoic does not expect fairness from the arrogant. He expects predictability. and he prepares his responses accordingly. Notice something subtle about this phrase. It gives the other person total freedom. You are not trying to control their thoughts. You are not trying to convert them. You are releasing them from your concern. And paradoxically, that freedom often unsettles them. When someone expects resistance and receives indifference, the script breaks. The power dynamic shifts, not because you seized control, but because you relinquished the need for it. Now you must practice this internally before you ever say it aloud. The real work is not the phrase. The real work is becoming someone who no longer needs to be understood by everyone. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That sentence cuts deep because it confronts your attachment to image. Ask yourself honestly, how often do you argue not to clarify truth, but to protect how you appear? Here is a simple exercise. Sit quietly and bring to mind moments when you felt the urge to defend yourself, not out of integrity but out of irritation. Notice the tension in your body, the tightening, the heat. Now imagine responding not with words but with inner stillness. Repeat silently, "Their opinion is theirs. My character is mine." Do this daily. You are training detachment the way others train muscles. Another exercise, practice withholding explanations, not forever, not in situations that demand accountability, but in moments where explanation is merely ego in disguise. When the impulse arises, pause, breathe. Let the impulse pass without action. You will feel discomfort at first. That discomfort is the ego losing its grip. Stay with it. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." This is your quiet adversity. Face it. Over time, think whatever you like becomes less something you say and more something you embody. Your tone changes. Your posture softens. Your need to dominate conversations fades. You begin to speak less but with more weight. And when you do choose to engage, it is intentional, not reactive. That is Stoic strength. Remember, arrogance is loud because it is insecure. It needs mirrors. You are not required to be one. When you stop reflecting arrogance back to its source, it has nothing to work with. The encounter ends, not with victory or defeat, but with clarity. So adopt this phrase, but earn it. Let it arise from discipline, not indifference, from self-respect, not avoidance. Let it be backed by daily practice, by reflection, by restraint. And when you finally say it, softly, evenly, without edge, know that you are not dismissing another person. You are affirming yourself. As wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This phrase is that realization, spoken aloud. Number 7, I hear you. 3 simple words, quiet, unimpressive on the surface, and yet when spoken with presence, they can disarm arrogance more effectively than any clever comeback ever could. You don't say them to agree. You don't say them to submit. You say them because you are grounded enough to listen without surrendering your center. And that is precisely why they work. Arrogance feeds on resistance. It feeds on emotional reaction, on interruption, on the subtle signal that someone else has managed to disturb your inner balance. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus reminded us, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. When you say, I hear you, you refuse to rush into judgment. You pause. You create space. You show that their words have reached your ears, but not your nervous system. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. When you speak those words, you are practicing a form of inner sovereignty. You are saying, without saying it, you do not control my emotional tempo. There is no argument embedded in the phrase, no defense, no offense, just acknowledgement. And acknowledgement is unsettling to arrogance because it removes the battlefield. There is nothing to push against, no ego to wrestle, no hook to grab onto. You remain still while they exhaust themselves. Wrote, be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved and the raging of the sea falls still around it. I hear you is that rock in verbal form. You're not absorbing the blow. You're not deflecting it aggressively either. You're letting it pass through without resistance. That calm presence forces the other person to confront themselves, because suddenly there is no opponent to dominate. Notice how different this is from silence alone. Silence can feel cold, ambiguous, or even hostile, but I hear you is warm without being weak. It signals awareness without compliance. It communicates that you are engaged, but not entangled. And this is crucial. Stoicism was never about withdrawal from life. It was about participation without enslavement, about being in the arena without letting the arena inside you. Arrogant people often speak to be seen, not to be understood. They talk to assert, not to connect. When you respond with "I hear you," you quietly flip the dynamic. You deny them the emotional payoff they expect. There's no escalation, no shrinking either, just calm recognition. Seneca warned, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. By choosing acknowledgement over reaction, you protect yourself first. The disarming effect is simply the byproduct. This phrase also trains you. Every time you say it, you are practicing restraint. You are choosing mastery over impulse. And that is a habit worth cultivating. You don't need to dominate every exchange. You don't need to prove intelligence, strength, or moral superiority. The need to prove is often the first sign of inner imbalance. When you say, "I hear you," you demonstrate that you are already complete. There is nothing to defend. Speak it slowly. Let it land. Let there be a brief pause afterward. Not a dramatic pause, just enough space to signal that you are present. That pause is where your power lives. It gives your nervous system time to stay regulated. It gives your mind time to remain clear. And clarity is always more intimidating than volume. There's also a deeper Stoic discipline at work here, separating what is said from what is meant, and both from how you feel about it. You are not responsible for correcting every flawed assertion or inflated self-image you encounter. Epictetus again. If someone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses, but answer. He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone. That same spirit lives inside, "I hear you." You acknowledge the sound without absorbing the story. To make this phrase part of who you are, you must rehearse it internally before you ever speak it aloud. Begin with a simple daily practice. When you feel the urge to interrupt, mentally or verbally, pause and silently say, "I hear this." Notice what happens inside you. Notice how the urgency to react softens. This is training. You are conditioning yourself to respond from choice rather than reflex. Another exercise: write the phrase "I hear you" at the top of a page, then underneath it write what it does not mean. It does not mean agreement. It does not mean surrender. It does not mean approval. This clarification matters because many people avoid calm phrases out of fear of being misunderstood. The Stoics were clear. Your intent is yours. Others' interpretations are not. Act according to virtue, not perception. You can also practice pairing this phrase with steady breathing. Inhale slowly through the nose, exhale longer than the inhale, then speak. This aligns your body with your words. Arrogance often tries to rush you, to pull you into its rhythm. Refuse that rhythm. Set your own. Calmness is contagious when it is real. Over time, you'll notice something shift. Conversations become shorter, tension dissolves faster, and most importantly, you walk away intact. That is the true victory. Not winning an argument, but preserving your inner order. Said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." When you respond to arrogance with grounded acknowledgement, you are doing exactly that. So take this phrase seriously, not as a tactic, but as a discipline. Use it to remind yourself that your worth is not negotiated in conversation, that your peace does not require permission. Say it with calm eyes, relaxed shoulders, and a steady voice. Say it because you are listening to them, yes, but more importantly to yourself. You hear them, and you remain unmoved. Number 8, let's agree to disagree. On the surface, it sounds simple, almost casual, but when you say it with intention, with inner firmness, it becomes one of the most powerful phrases you can use against arrogance. Not because it wins the argument, but because it refuses to participate in the ego battle at all. And that is exactly what disarms arrogant people. They thrive on resistance. They feed on engagement. They need you to push back, explain yourself, defend your intelligence, or prove your worth. When you calmly say, let's agree to disagree, you remove the fuel. You don't escalate, you don't submit either. You simply step out of the arena, composed and intact. You need to understand something important here. This phrase is not about weakness, it's about self-mastery. Epictetus reminds you, if anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone. That's the same spirit at work. You are not obligated to correct every misconception or overpower every opinion. Your peace matters more than being right. When arrogance meets calm detachment, it loses its grip. There is nothing to grab onto. Arrogant people often mistake disagreement for a challenge. In their mind, differing views means someone must be conquered. When you say, let's agree to disagree, you quietly deny them that narrative. You're saying, without saying it, I don't need your validation and I don't need to dominate you either. That balance is unsettling to them. They expect friction. They expect you to argue harder, raise your voice, sharpen your logic. Instead, you offer closure, and closure is powerful. You're not conceding defeat, you're choosing sovereignty. Wrote, you always own the option of having no opinion. Let that sink in. No opinion doesn't mean no intelligence. It means you decide where your energy goes. When you use this phrase, you're exercising that option. You're showing that your sense of self isn't tied to convincing others. That kind of inner independence is rare, and it's felt immediately. Now here's the subtle part most people miss. The effectiveness of let's agree to disagree doesn't come from the words alone. It comes from your tone, your packing, your inner state. If you say it with irritation, it sounds dismissive. If you say it defensively, it sounds like retreat. But when you say it calmly, slowly, without urgency, it lands differently. It communicates confidence without aggression. It tells the other person that the conversation has reached its natural end, and you are at peace with that. You're also setting a boundary, a quiet one, a dignified one. Seneca said, no one can provoke you unless you allow it. This phrase is you not allowing it. You're deciding that further discussion will not improve your life, your clarity, or your character. That decision alone puts you in a position of strength. Arrogant people are deeply uncomfortable with boundaries they can't cross. They don't know how to react when someone doesn't react. There's also a deeper Stoic lesson here about control. You cannot control what others think, believe, or insist on. Trying to do so only entangles you in frustration, but you can control how much access they have to your emotional space. Let's agree to disagree is a clean exit. No explanation required, no justification needed. And that lack of explanation is exactly what makes it powerful. You're not asking for permission to disengage. You're simply disengaging. This phrase also trains you. Every time you use it sincerely, you reinforce a habit of restraint. You practice pausing instead of reacting. You choose composure over compulsion. Over time, this rewires how you approach conflict. You stop seeing disagreement as something that threatens your identity. You start seeing it as neutral information that doesn't require action. That shift alone can change how people perceive you. Calm people are often assumed to be confident. And confidence, especially quiet confidence, naturally disarms arrogance. You may notice something else too. When you stop over-explaining yourself, your words gain weight. Arrogant people tend to talk a lot. They fill space. When you don't compete for airtime, your silence becomes noticeable. Let's agree to disagree, followed by a calm presence, creates a contrast. It signals that you don't need the last word to feel whole. That's rare. And rarity commands respect, even if it's never verbalized. To make this phrase part of who you are, you need to practice it internally first. Here's a simple exercise. When you feel the urge to correct, to argue, or to prove something, pause, take one slow breath. Then say to yourself, I don't need to win this. Notice what happens in your body. The tension eases. Your thoughts slow down. That internal version of the phrase is just as important as the spoken one. Another exercise is mental rehearsal. Visualize situations where opinions clash. Instead of imagining sharp comebacks or long explanations, imagine yourself calmly saying, let's agree to disagree, and then mentally stepping back. Not walking away in anger, just standing firm, relaxed, unbothered. The Stoics believed in preparing the mind in advance. This is a modern version of that. You're training your nervous system to choose calm over chaos. You can also journal on this. Write down moments where you felt pulled into unnecessary debates, not to criticize yourself, but to observe patterns. Ask yourself, what was I trying to protect? Often it's ego, not truth. Awareness weakens that impulse. And with awareness, the phrase becomes easier to use, more natural, less forced. Remember, the goal is not to silence others, it's to free yourself. Arrogant people lose their power when you stop needing their approval or their defeat. Let's agree to disagree is a declaration of that freedom. It's you saying, I respect my time, my energy, and my inner peace. And as also warned, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Calm, grounded, unmoved. Adopt this phrase not as a tactic, but as a reflection of your values. Use it sparingly, sincerely, and without bitterness. Over time, you'll notice fewer arguments, less mental noise, and a stronger sense of self. And that, more than any clever reply, is what truly disarms arrogance. Number 9, I don't take that personally. Beneath those 5 words sits a level of inner discipline that arrogant people rarely know how to deal with. This phrase isn't passive. It isn't weak. It's not avoidance. It's power without noise. And when you learn to say it and mean it, you stop handing over control of your inner world to people who thrive on provocation. Arrogance feeds on reaction. It survives on your emotional investment. The raised eyebrow, the tightened jaw, the need to defend, explain, or correct. The Stoics understood this deeply. Wrote, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. That's not denial, that's sovereignty. When you say, I don't take that personally, you're practicing exactly that. You're choosing not to internalize someone else's disorder. Most people take things personally by default. A comment becomes an insult. A tone becomes an attack. A careless remark turns into a story about your worth, and arrogant people know this. They poke, belittle, posture, and exaggerate because they expect you to absorb it. When you don't, the game collapses. You're no longer playing on their field. You're standing on your own ground, calm, unmovable, and uninterested in their need to feel superior. This phrase works because it separates identity from opinion. You're saying, without hostility, what you just said belongs to you, not to me. Epictetus was relentless on this point. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That line should sit with you, because every time you take something personally, you're silently agreeing that someone else gets to decide how you feel about yourself. I don't take that personally is you withdrawing that permission. And here's the part most people miss. This phrase isn't meant to be performative. It's not a clever comeback. If you say it while still boiling inside, arrogant people will sense it. The real work happens before the words ever leave your mouth. You train yourself to pause, to notice the impulse to react, to watch the ego flare up and then soften. That pause is where your power grows. That's where you stop being predictable. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become numb. It asks you to become selective. Seneca said, We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Arrogance thrives in that imagination, where you replay words, assign intent, and build meaning that was never yours to carry. When you stop taking things personally, you shrink that imaginary suffering. You return to what you can control: your judgment, your response, your direction. Saying "I don't take that personally" also quietly exposes arrogance for what it is: insecurity dressed up as confidence. Truly secure people don't need to diminish others. They don't need to dominate conversations or assert superiority. Arrogance is usually a mask, and when you refuse to react, the mask slips. Not because you attacked it, but because you didn't feed it. This phrase keeps you emotionally economical. You stop spending energy where there's no return. You stop carrying conversations long after they've ended. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never trying to understand. Instead, you conserve your attention for what actually matters: your values, your craft, your growth. Reminded himself daily, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Not taking things personally is exactly that. You refuse to mirror their pettiness, their insecurity, their hunger for validation. Now this takes practice. Your nervous system is used to reacting. Your mind is trained to defend, so start small. One practical exercise is mental labeling. When you feel triggered, silently say, "That's their opinion, not my identity." Don't argue with it. Just observe the sensation and let it pass. Another exercise is negative visualization, a Stoic favorite. Before entering challenging interactions, remind yourself that arrogance may show up. Prepare your response in advance. Not the words, but the state: calm, grounded, unrushed. You can also practice voluntary silence. When arrogance tries to pull you into a reaction, do nothing. Feel how uncomfortable that urge to respond can be. Stay with it. That discomfort is temporary, but the self-control you build from it compounds. Over time, you'll notice something shift. Fewer things get under your skin. Fewer people have access to your emotions. You become harder to manipulate, not because you're closed off, but because you're anchored. "I don't take that personally" is also a commitment you make to yourself. It means you stop outsourcing your self-worth. It means you measure yourself by your principles, not by passing remarks. It means you recognize that most arrogance says more about the speaker's inner chaos than about you. Epictetus put it plainly: "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This phrase is a living expression of that idea. So take this seriously, not as a line to memorize, but as a mindset to embody. Practice separating noise from truth. Practice letting comments pass without lodging inside you. Practice responding from choice instead of reflex. When you do, arrogant people lose their leverage. They can't hook you. They can't rattle you. They can't drag you into their need for dominance. And the most powerful part, you don't need to prove anything. Your calm does the work for you. Your detachment speaks louder than any rebuttal. Say the phrase when it's true. Live it even when you don't say it. That's Stoic strength. Quiet, grounded, unshakable. Start today. Watch your reactions. Train your judgment. Reclaim your inner space. Because the moment you stop taking things personally is the moment you start living on your own terms. Number 10. Silence, calm eye contact, no words. This is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength you can cultivate. Most people think power lives in clever replies, sharp comebacks, or verbal dominance. The Stoics knew better. Wrote, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things." When someone approaches you with arrogance, provocation, or subtle disrespect, the real test isn't what you say. It's whether you feel compelled to say anything at all. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is not absence. It is a command. It is you refusing to hand over your inner state to someone else's noise. You already know the urge, that tightening in the chest, the impulse to explain yourself, to correct them, to prove something. Arrogant people feed on that reflex. They thrive on reaction. Epictetus warned, if you wish to be invincible, make sure that no one can provoke you. Calm eye contact paired with silence does exactly that. It denies them the reward they're fishing for. No emotional spike, no verbal fuel, just presence, stillness, awareness. At that moment, you're not frozen, you're grounded. You're choosing not to wrestle in mud that isn't yours. What makes this so disarming is that it reverses the power dynamic instantly. Arrogance expects friction. It anticipates resistance, justification, or submission. Silence offers none of those. When you hold eye contact calmly, without tension, without hostility, you're signaling something subtle but profound. I am not moved. Seneca put it plainly, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Silence is delay refined into discipline. It gives you space. It keeps your dignity intact. And it quietly exposes the insecurity behind arrogance without you lifting a finger. This isn't about intimidation. It's about self-mastery. There's a difference. Intimidation is outward force. Self-mastery is inward stability. When you stay silent and steady, you're practicing what the Stoics called ruling the inner citadel. You're choosing reason over impulse. You're reminding yourself that your worth doesn't require announcement or defense. Arrogant behavior often tries to pull you into comparison, hierarchy, or dominance games. Silence steps outside the game entirely. And paradoxically, that's what wins. You may notice something interesting when you practice this. The discomfort shifts. At first, it's yours. You feel the itch to speak. But if you hold steady, the discomfort migrates. It lands on them. Humans are wired to interpret silence. When you don't fill the space, others start projecting into it. Calm eye contact magnifies that effect. You're not glaring, you're not challenging, you're simply present, observing, unrushed. That presence alone often communicates more authority than paragraphs of words ever could. The Stoics repeatedly emphasized that you should only invest energy where it aligns with virtue. Reminded himself, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Silence is often the most virtuous response because it refuses to participate in pettiness, ego contests, or emotional chaos. It keeps your mind clean, it preserves your time, and it trains you to respond instead of react. That distinction matters. Reaction is automatic, response is chosen. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you speak when your words add value, not when they serve your ego. Silence becomes a filter. Before words leave your mouth, they pass through calm, through intention, through clarity. When you're silent by choice, you're telling yourself, I don't need to win this moment to win my life. That mindset alone weakens the grip arrogant people try to establish over you. There's also a deeper internal shift happening here. Silence teaches you to tolerate tension without escaping it. Many people talk to relieve discomfort, not to communicate the truth. By staying silent, you train your nervous system to stay regulated under pressure. This is Stoic resilience in action. Epictetus advised, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. If the person you aim to be is composed, grounded, and sovereign over your reactions, silence becomes a daily practice, not a trick. To integrate this into your life, you need to train it deliberately. Start with awareness. Notice how often you feel the urge to speak just to fill space or defend an image of yourself. Don't judge it, just observe. That observation alone creates distance. Next, practice controlled stillness. When you feel provoked, soften your face. Relax your jaw, let your shoulders drop. Breathe slowly through your nose. Then hold gentle eye contact. Not starring, not avoiding, just a present. Count 3 slow breaths before deciding whether words are necessary. Most of the time, they won't be. Another exercise is reflective restraint. At the end of the day, revisit moments where silence could have served you better. Ask yourself, was my response guided by reason or impulse? Did this daily in his private writings? This isn't self-criticism, it's calibration. Over time, you'll notice that silence becomes less effortful. It stops feeling like suppression and starts feeling like choice. You can also practice intentional silence in low-stakes moments. Not every pause needs a reply. Let gaps exist. Let conversations breathe. This conditions you to see silence not as awkwardness but as neutrality, as space, as strength. Seneca wrote, "He who knows how to be silent is close to the gods." Silence reconnects you to your center. From that center, arrogance loses its power to hook you. Remember, the goal is not to dominate others, it's to dominate yourself. When you master silence with calm eye contact, you stop outsourcing your emotional control. You reclaim your authority. You move through the world less reactive, less entangled, more deliberate. Arrogant people may still exist. They may still posture, but they no longer disturb your inner weather, and that is real freedom. So the next time you're tempted to speak just to assert, correct, or defend, pause. Let silence do the work. Let your presence speak before your mouth ever does. Practice it daily. Sharpen it patiently. This is not weakness disguised as calm. This is strength refined into stillness. Before you go, remember this. The Stoics never tried to dominate others. They mastered themselves. The moment you stop reacting to arrogance with ego, explanations, or emotional heat, you take back control. Power doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It doesn't need approval. It stands calm, grounded, and unshaken. Every phrase you heard today is more than a response. It's a mirror. A mirror that exposes insecurity without cruelty, that ends tension without conflict, and that leaves you standing tall without ever raising your voice. When you choose composure over confrontation, you don't just disarm arrogant people, you elevate yourself above the game entirely. So the next time someone tests you, remember this lesson. Your silence, your restraint, your measured words, they are weapons sharper than any insult. Use them wisely. If this video resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on which phrase you'll carry into your next interaction and start applying it today. If you want more Stoic lessons that sharpen your mind, strengthen your presence, and teach you how to move through the world with quiet confidence, like the video, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Because the strongest person in the room is always the. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. What if I told you that the reason women don't chase you has nothing to do with your looks, money, or status, and everything to do with what's happening inside your mind? What if the very behaviors you think make you attractive are silently doing the opposite, and you don't even realize it? Most men try harder, they explain more. They chase signals, overinvest emotionally, and give away their power hoping it will be noticed. But psychology and Stoic wisdom teach something far more uncomfortable and far more effective. People desire what doesn't need them, what remains composed, what isn't seeking approval. This video isn't about manipulation. It's about alignment, about subtle psychological shifts that change how women feel around you, without you saying more, proving more, or pretending to be someone you're not. These are the same quiet principles that make some men unforgettable while others are overlooked, no matter how hard they try. And here, the key. Each trick builds on the previous one. Miss one and the effect weakens. Stay until the very end and you'll understand not just what makes women chase, but why it works at such a deep psychological level. Watch closely. This might change how you show up forever. Number 1. Emotional self-control under pressure. Emotional self-control under pressure is one of those traits that quietly changes everything about how you move through the world. You feel it most when tension rises, when expectations collide, when silence stretches longer than comfort allows. In those moments, most people reveal their inner chaos without realizing it. You don't have to. You can choose to become the calm center instead. And that choice, repeated often enough, reshapes how you are perceived and how others respond to you. The Stoics understood this deeply. Wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as restraint, as steadiness, as the refusal to be dragged into emotional turbulence. When you stop reacting impulsively, you stop handing control to circumstances or to other people's moods. You stay grounded. You stay deliberate. And that quiet composure creates a psychological pull that words never could. When pressure hits, the instinct is to explain yourself, defend your position, or rush to regain emotional balance. But emotional self-control means resisting that urge. It means allowing space between stimulus and response. In that space, you decide who you are going to be. You don't chase clarity. You don't chase reassurance. You don't chase outcomes. You let your behavior communicate what your words don't need to. Calm becomes your default language. This is where attraction shifts, not because you are trying to impress, but because emotional discipline signals inner security. When you don't crumble under pressure, you project a sense of stability that feels rare. You become someone who doesn't need to be managed emotionally, someone who isn't easily shaken, someone who doesn't seek validation when things feel uncertain. That absence of neediness creates curiosity, and curiosity fuels pursuit. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Pressure isn't the enemy, it's the training ground. Every emotionally charged moment is an invitation to practice self-command. Each time you choose restraint over reaction, you reinforce a new identity. You stop being predictable. You stop being reactive. You stop being emotionally available on demand. Instead, you become selective with your energy. You don't suppress emotions. That's not control, that's avoidance. Real control means acknowledging what you feel without letting it dictate your actions. You feel tension, but you don't rush to dissolve it. You feel uncertainty, but you don't fill the silence. You feel discomfort, but you don't try to fix it immediately. You allow emotions to pass through you like weather, not commands. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. This shift requires daily discipline. Start with awareness. When pressure arises, notice your internal impulses before acting on them. The urge to respond quickly, the urge to explain, the urge to prove. Simply noticing these impulses weakens them. You don't fight them, you observe them. That alone creates distance. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Change the judgment and the pressure loses its grip. Another powerful habit is intentional pause. When emotions rise, delay your response. Not dramatically, not defensively, just enough to regain authorship over your behavior. Count your breaths, relax your jaw, drop your shoulders. These physical cues tell your nervous system that you are safe, that you are in control. Over time, your body learns calm faster than your mind ever could. You also need to train emotional neutrality in low-stakes moments. Don't wait for intensity. Practice calm when you're mildly irritated, mildly bored, mildly misunderstood. These moments are repetitions in the gym of self-control. Each rep builds capacity. When real pressure arrives, you don't panic. You've been here before. You know how to stay composed. Another exercise is reframing outcomes. Instead of attaching your emotional state to how things should go, detach your self-worth from results altogether. When you stop needing a specific response, you stop broadcasting emotional hunger. You show that your internal state is self-generated. That independence is felt instantly. It changes the dynamic. The one who needs less control holds more power. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you grounded. You still feel deeply, you just don't leak emotion unconsciously. You decide when and how to express yourself. That selectivity creates contrast. When you do open up, it carries weight. When you remain silent, it carries intention. Either way, you are choosing, not reacting. Pressure also reveals boundaries. Emotional self-control allows you to enforce them without drama. You don't argue your limits. You embody them. You don't justify your standards. You live them. And because there's no emotional volatility attached, your boundaries feel non-negotiable. Calm firmness is far more compelling than emotional insistence. You'll notice something else as you practice this. The need to be chaste disappears. And paradoxically, that's when pursuit begins. Not because you're manipulating, but because you're no longer seeking emotional safety from others. You already have it within yourself. That self-containment changes the energy completely. End each day with reflection. Ask yourself where you reacted and where you responded, where you held your center and where you lost it. No judgment, just awareness. Improvement follows attention. Over time, emotional self-control stops being something you do and becomes who you are. Remember this: composure under pressure is not about winning moments. It's about mastering yourself. And when you master yourself, everything else rearranges around you. You don't chase, you attract. You don't demand, you invite. You don't react, you decide. And that quiet authority is felt long before it's understood. Number 2, non-reactive responses to tests and provocation. When you stop reacting, everything changes. If you are distressed by anything external, Epictetus wrote, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Read that again and let it land. The moment you truly understand this, you begin to operate on a different level. Non-reactive responses to tests and provocation aren't about playing games or suppressing emotion. They're about mastery, about choosing yourself over impulse, about refusing to hand over your inner state to someone else's behavior. When you no longer flinch, argue, explain, or defend, something subtle but powerful happens. You become grounded, and grounded men are rare. Scarcity creates attraction. Most people react automatically. A comment hits, a look lingers too long, silence stretches, energy shifts, and they rush to fix it. They talk more, they justify, they chase clarity. You've done it before, everyone has. But every reactive move quietly signals that your emotional balance depends on how someone treats you in that moment. That dependence is felt immediately, even if nothing is said. Non-reactivity, on the other hand, communicates something entirely different. You are steady. You are not ruled by mood swings, tests, or pressure. Put it simply, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's calm, contained, and deeply compelling. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop seeing tests and provocations as threats. They are not attacks. They are invitations, unconscious ones, to reveal your emotional center. When you react, you reveal its external. When you don't, you reveal its internal. That's the difference between being led and leading. Non-reactive doesn't mean cold or indifferent. It means measured. It means you pause before responding, not because you're calculating, but because you don't need to rush. Urgency disappears when you trust yourself. And trust in yourself is felt as confidence, not arrogance. You need to train this, not intellectually, but start with silence. Silence is uncomfortable for most people because it removes their sense of control. When something provocative is said, don't rush to fill the space. Let the moment breathe. Let the words sit. You'll notice a strange thing. The tension often dissolves on its own. The mind of the other person starts doing the work for you. Seneca warned against impulsive speech when he said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Delay is not weakness. Delay is dominance over yourself. Practice giving yourself 2 full breaths before responding to anything that triggers you. 2 breaths sound small, but they are enough to interrupt old patterns. Next, detach your identity from the outcome. This is where most men struggle. They want to be liked, respected, understood right now. That craving fuels reaction. But when you stop tying your self-worth to immediate approval, your responses naturally slow down. You no longer feel the need to win the moment. You're playing a longer game, alignment with who you are. Ask yourself silently, is reacting improving my position or just easing my discomfort? More often than not, it's the latter. Choosing not to react is choosing long-term strength over short-term relief. Another habit to build is neutral acknowledgement. You don't need to agree. You don't need to disagree. You simply recognize what was said without emotional charge. This keeps you centered and prevents escalation. The Stoics believed in responding according to reason, not impulse. Epictetus reminded his students that it is not things themselves that disturb men, but their judgments about them. Change the judgment and the disturbance vanishes. When you hear something provocative, label it internally as noise. Not important, not urgent, just sound passing through. You should also work on body stillness. This is often overlooked, but it's critical. Emotional reactivity leaks through posture, facial tension, restless movement. Train yourself to remain physically relaxed when pressure appears. Shoulders down, jaw unclenched, breath slow. The body leads the mind more than you think. When your body stays calm, your mind follows. This calm becomes contagious. People feel it. They lean toward it. It creates a subtle pull because it contrasts so sharply with the emotional volatility most are used to. Here's a daily exercise you can start immediately. At the end of each day, replay moments where you felt triggered, not to judge yourself, but to observe. Ask, what did I feel in my body? Where did I rush? What would non-reaction have looked like? This reflection builds awareness. Awareness builds choice. Choice builds control. Over time, you'll notice fewer triggers hit as hard. That's not suppression, that's growth. Another powerful practice is voluntary discomfort. Put yourself in situations where you're slightly uncomfortable and practice staying composed. Not proving anything, just staying steady. The Stoics trained this intentionally because they understood that resilience is built before pressure arrives, not during it. When you're used to discomfort, provocation loses its edge. You stop fearing emotional tension because you've already learned to sit with it. As you adopt non-reactivity, something interesting happens. You stop trying to manage perception. You stop strategizing responses. You simply are, and that authenticity is magnetic. People feel safer around emotional stability. They become curious about it. They test it not to break it, but to understand it. When your reactions don't spike, don't collapse, don't escalate, the dynamic shifts. The chase isn't something you force. It emerges naturally when your presence feels grounded and rare. Remember this, non-reactivity is not about withholding emotion. It's about choosing expression consciously. You still speak, you still engage, but you do it from a place of self-command, not reflex. Lived by this daily, reminding himself to meet provocation with calm reason rather than ego. You can do the same. Start small. Practice today. Slow your responses. Breathe before you speak. Let go of the need to correct, impress, or defend. The more you do this, the more you'll notice something profound. You're no longer chasing control. You embody it. Number 3, scarcity created through a full, independent life. Scarcity doesn't come from playing games or pretending to be busy. It comes from being genuinely occupied by a full, independent life, one that doesn't orbit around attention, approval, or outcomes. When your life is rich, structured, and internally rewarding, your time naturally becomes limited, and that limitation is felt, not announced, not explained, felt. As wrote, concentrate every minute like a Roman on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. That seriousness creates gravity. When you stop hovering, stop waiting, stop checking whether someone is leaning toward you or away from you, something shifts. You become harder to access emotionally because you are deeply engaged elsewhere, not distracted, not avoidant, but anchored. And that anchoring creates pull. You don't create scarcity by withholding messages or disappearing strategically. That's fragile. It collapses the moment your intent is exposed. True scarcity emerges when your days are full of pursuits that matter to you, whether anyone is watching or not. when your schedule reflects priorities instead of availability, when your mind is occupied with growth, mastery, and direction rather than anticipation. Seneca warned, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Most people waste enormous mental energy wondering how they're perceived. When you stop doing that, you reclaim time, and reclaimed time changes your posture. You move slower. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of chase. That difference is impossible to fake. When you build a life that doesn't require constant emotional feedback, you stop leaking urgency. There's no rush in your words, no pressure in your presence. You don't need to lock anything down because you're not afraid of losing it. That calm is unsettling in a world addicted to reassurance. And it's deeply attractive, not because it's manipulative, but because it signals self-trust. Epictetus put it simply, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Translation: stop managing impressions. Stop curating reactions. Let your life speak without narration. Scarcity grows naturally when your energy is invested inward rather than projected outward. Here, where most people get it wrong. They think independence is emotional distance. It's not. Independence is emotional ownership. You feel fully, but you don't hand responsibility for those feelings to anyone else. You enjoy connection without clinging to it. You appreciate interest without becoming dependent on it. When your happiness isn't negotiable, your presence becomes optional, and optional presence carries weight. You're not needed, you're chosen. That distinction changes everything. People chase what they choose, not what depends on them. To build this kind of scarcity, you have to reorient your daily habits. Start with silence. Not social silence, internal silence. Spend time each day without stimulation, without checking, without input. Let boredom surface. Let restlessness appear. Don't escape it, sit with it. This trains you to stop outsourcing regulation. Then choose one pursuit that demands your full attention and long-term commitment, not for recognition, not for leverage, for discipline. Something that progresses slowly. Something that can't be rushed. This rewires your relationship with time. You stop measuring days by responses and start measuring them by depth. Another exercise is to deliberately reduce explanation. Notice how often you justify your choices, clarify your intentions, or soften your boundaries with words. Practice letting decisions stand without commentary, not coldly, calmly. You don't owe access to your inner world on demand. Reminded himself, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. The less you overcommunicate, the more space you create. Space invites curiosity. Curiosity fuels pursuit. You also need to audit where your emotional energy goes. Ask yourself, what am I trying to extract from others right now? Validation, certainty, relief from loneliness. Awareness alone weakens the habit. Replace extraction with cultivation. Each time you feel the urge to check, to seek reassurance, to lean forward emotionally, redirect that energy into self-command. Breathe. Slow down. Return to what you were doing. Scarcity is not absence. It's presence directed elsewhere. This doesn't mean you become unavailable or aloof. It means you are available on your terms. You engage fully when you choose to engage. You withdraw fully when it's time to focus inward. No half steps. No emotional hovering. That decisiveness is rare, and rarity is the root of desire. Seneca observed, a man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. When you stop pre-suffering imagined losses, you stop signaling fear, and fearlessness is magnetic. Your goal isn't to be chased, that's a side effect. Your goal is to become someone whose life is already in motion, someone who doesn't need momentum from outside. When others sense that you won't pause your trajectory for attention, they lean in. Not because you demand it, because they want proximity to direction. Scarcity formed this way doesn't expire. It deepens. It compounds. And the more you protect it, the less you have to think about attraction at all. So take action. Simplify your life. Commit to fewer things, but commit harder. reduce noise, increase focus. Guard your time like a philosopher guards his thoughts. Let your days be full before anyone else enters them. When you do this consistently, you won't need tricks. You'll have gravity, and gravity doesn't chase, it pulls. Number 4, validation, restraint instead of approval seeking. Validation, restraint instead of approval seeking is one of those ideas that sounds simple on the surface but quietly rewires the way you move through the world. You're not trying to impress. You're not fishing for reactions. You're not scanning faces, tone, or silence to measure your worth. You decide calmly and deliberately that your internal standards matter more than anyone else's response. And the moment you do that, something shifts. Your energy changes. Your presence steadies. You stop leaning forward, and instead, the world subtly leans toward you. Most men don't realize how often they give away their power through approval seeking. It's not always obvious. It can be hidden behind politeness, over-explaining, constant reassurance, or the urge to be liked. But beneath all of it is the same quiet message: tell me I'm enough. When you operate from that place, your behavior becomes reactive. You adjust your words. You soften your edges. You chase harmony instead of truth. And people feel that even if they can't explain it. Validation restraint is the opposite. It's not coldness. It's not arrogance. It's emotional self-sufficiency. It's you deciding that your actions don't need applause to be valid. The Stoics understood this deeply, reminded himself, I do not need what others approve of. That wasn't a motivational quote. It was a daily discipline. The idea is simple but demanding. You act according to your values, not according to the crowd's reaction. When you practice validation restraint, you stop outsourcing your confidence. You stop asking the world to confirm what you should already know. And paradoxically, that's when attention begins to flow toward you, not because you demanded it, but because you no longer need it. What makes this so powerful is that it creates emotional gravity. When you don't rush to be understood, approved of, or praised, you communicate self-trust. You speak when you mean it. You pause without anxiety. You don't fill silence just to relieve tension. That restraint is felt as depth. It signals that your inner world is stable, that your sense of self isn't fragile. Epictetus put it bluntly: if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, stop defending your image. Stop managing perceptions. Let people think what they want. Your job is to live in alignment, not performance. Approval seeking drains energy because it never ends. There's always another reaction to read, another response to chase, another moment of doubt. Validation restraint conserves energy. It brings you back to yourself. You stop asking, did that land? Did I say the right thing? Do they like me now? And you start asking a different question: was I grounded? Was I honest? Was I composed? That internal shift changes how you carry yourself. Your posture settles, your voice slows, your eyes stop searching. You're no longer trying to win the moment, you're inhabiting it. This is where the psychological pull happens. When you're not trying to secure approval, you create space. Space invites curiosity. Silence invites projection. Restraint invites pursuit. People are naturally drawn to what doesn't beg to be chosen. Seneca captured this when he said, "He who is brave is free." Freedom here isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet. It's the freedom of not needing to be validated to feel whole. And that freedom is felt as strength. To practice this, you need to retrain your reflexes. Start by noticing the impulse to explain yourself. Not eliminating it, just noticing it. Feel the moment when you want to justify a choice, soften an opinion, or seek reassurance. Pause there. Breathe. Let the moment pass without acting on it. This is not suppression, it's restraint. You're teaching your nervous system that nothing bad happens when you don't chase approval. Over time, that pause becomes natural, powerful, almost effortless. Another exercise is to redefine success internally. At the end of the day, don't ask whether you were liked. Ask whether you were centered. Ask whether you reacted emotionally or responded deliberately. Ask whether you acted from fear or principle. Write these questions down. Answer them honestly. This practice builds an inner scoreboard that no one else can control. And once your validation comes from there, external reactions lose their grip on you. You can also train validation restraint through silence. Choose moments where you intentionally say less than you could, not as a tactic but as a discipline. Let your words be intentional, not automatic. Let your presence do some of the talking. Silence isn't emptiness, it's confidence without explanation. Often reminded himself to waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. You don't need to announce who you are. Your restraint reveals it. This mindset doesn't make you distant, it makes you grounded. You still care, you still engage, but you're no longer emotionally dependent on outcomes. You're not trying to pull interest toward you. You're allowing it to arise naturally. And that's the difference people feel. Approval seekers chase. Grounded men attract without effort, not because they manipulate, but because they are internally aligned. Adopting validation restraint is uncomfortable at first. Your ego will protest. Your old habits will push back, but stay with it. Every time you choose self-respect over reassurance, you reinforce a new identity, one rooted in calm, not craving. Over time, this becomes who you are. You stop trying to be chosen, and strangely enough, that's when you start being pursued, not because you asked for it, but because your self-sufficiency makes others want to step closer. Take this seriously. Practice it daily. Let your confidence come from your character, not reactions. Let your calm replace your neediness. As the Stoics knew long ago, the man who governs himself no longer needs permission from the world, and that quiet authority changes everything. Number 5. Calm confidence expressed through silence. Calm confidence expressed through silence is one of the most misunderstood forces in human attraction, mostly because you've been conditioned to believe that confidence must announce itself. It doesn't. Real confidence settles. It slows your breathing. It removes the itch to explain, justify, or prove. When you grow comfortable with silence, something powerful happens inside you. You stop leaking energy. You stop chasing reactions. You stop performing. And paradoxically, this absence of effort creates gravity. People lean in when there is space. Desire grows where there is restraint. As one Stoic philosopher observed, strength reveals itself not through noise, but through composure. When you allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it, you communicate that you trust yourself, that you are unshaken by uncertainty, and that you don't need permission to take up space. Silence is not withdrawal, it's presence without desperation. Most people talk to manage anxiety, not to express truth. When you speak less, your words carry weight. When you pause, you show mastery over impulse. And mastery is deeply attractive because it signals inner order. Reminded himself that tranquility comes from governing the mind, not the external world. Silence is one of the simplest ways to practice that governance. You begin to realize that not every moment needs commentary, not every emotion needs expression, and not every thought deserves airtime. When you adopt this mindset, you stop reacting automatically. You respond deliberately. That shift alone separates you from the majority. Calm confidence through silence works because it flips the usual dynamic. Instead of trying to be seen, you allow yourself to be observed. Instead of chasing engagement, you let curiosity build. The Stoics believe that a person who is content within themselves becomes invulnerable to manipulation. When you're silent and relaxed, you're signaling that your sense of worth is not negotiated in real time. You're not fishing for approval. You're not afraid of pauses. You're not rattled by ambiguity. That steadiness creates a subtle tension, and tension is the seed of attraction. Not drama, not chaos, but the quiet tension of someone who is fully grounded. You'll notice that silence forces others to project. When you don't rush to fill the space, people begin to fill it for you, often revealing more than they intend. This isn't a trick you perform, it's a state you inhabit. Epictetus warned that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. Silence gives you time to suspend judgment. It keeps you from overcommitting emotionally. It allows you to stay centered while others move around you, and that centeredness is felt instantly. It communicates that you are not controlled by the moment. You are choosing how to engage with it. To cultivate this, you must first break the habit of compulsive expression. Start noticing how often you speak to relieve tension rather than to convey meaning. The next time you feel the urge to fill a pause, resist it. Let the silence breathe. Let your body relax into it instead of tensing up. This is not passive, it's disciplined. Seneca wrote that a person is powerful when they can sit with themselves without distraction. Silence trains that muscle. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is a signal that you're shedding dependence on external feedback. Stay with it. That's where growth happens. A practical exercise you can adopt daily is intentional pausing. Throughout your interactions, practice delaying your response by a few seconds, not in a calculated way, but in a grounded one. Use that pause to check in with your breath. Feel your feet. Relax your jaw. When you do speak, speak slowly. Fewer words, clearer tone. Another exercise is silent observation. Spend time simply watching your thoughts without reacting to them. This trains you to remain composed when emotions arise. Over time, you'll notice that your need to explain yourself fades. You'll feel less urgency to impress. That inner stillness begins to radiate outward. Calm confidence expressed through silence also reshapes how you see yourself. You stop measuring your value by how well you're received in the moment. You begin to trust your presence without embellishment. This trust changes your posture, your eye contact, your pace. You move more deliberately. You listen more deeply. And listening, when done without an agenda, is magnetic. The Stoics emphasized attention as a form of respect, both for others and for oneself. When you listen fully and speak selectively, you demonstrate self-respect, and people respond to that instinctively. You don't need to withdraw or become aloof. Silence is not coldness. It's warmth without noise. It's confidence without performance. It's knowing that you don't have to chase to be chosen. By practicing restraint, you allow others to feel your steadiness. By staying calm, you create contrast in a world addicted to stimulation. And contrast draws attention. Make silence your ally. Let it sharpen your awareness. Let it deepen your composure. With time, you'll notice that when you stop trying to attract, attraction starts moving toward you. Number 6. Unpredictability without inconsistency. Unpredictability without inconsistency is about becoming mentally spacious, not chaotic. It's the art of being grounded enough that your presence feels alive, never stale, yet stable enough that nothing about you feels unsafe or erratic. Most people misunderstand this. They think unpredictability means playing games, withholding affection randomly, or behaving in ways that contradict their values. That kind of behavior doesn't create attraction. It creates confusion and quiet distrust. What actually draws people in, especially women, is the sense that you are deeply rooted in who you are, yet never fully readable. You are calm but not boring, structured but not rigid, familiar but never routine. And the moment you internalize this, the way you move through interactions changes almost immediately. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology tried to label it. Wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." Notice what he's pointing at. Not randomness, not volatility, firmness, a stable core. The unpredictability comes from the waves, not the rock. When you are centered, when your values don't shift based on approval or reaction, your external behavior gains a quiet unpredictability because it's no longer driven by neediness or scripts. You stop reacting the way people expect you to. You pause. You choose. You move on your own internal clock. That alone is disarming. What makes this powerful is that most people are painfully consistent in the worst way. They text at the same pace, respond emotionally the same way every time, give reassurance on demand, explain themselves endlessly, and signal their intentions far too early. Their behavior is predictable because it's governed by fear, fear of loss, fear of silence, fear of being misunderstood. When you step out of that pattern, not by playing cold but by being internally complete, you become harder to mentally categorize. And the mind hates unfinished patterns. It leans in. It chases resolution. This doesn't require you to change your personality. It requires you to stop over-explaining it. Seneca warned, "He who explains himself too much gives others the power to define him." When you always clarify, justify, and smooth over every interaction, you remove mystery. You make yourself easy to file away. Unpredictability without inconsistency means you let your actions speak, but you don't rush to narrate them. You allow space. You let silence do some of the work. You resist the urge to always be available, not as a tactic, but as a boundary. Your life doesn't orbit anticipation. It moves forward whether anyone is watching or not. Here, where most men get this wrong, they think unpredictability means being emotionally unavailable. It doesn't. Emotional absence feels hollow. What works is emotional self-sufficiency. There's a big difference. You're present when you choose to be, fully so, but you're not dependent on constant interaction to feel steady. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, make yourself independent of the things you cannot control." When your mood, tone, and decisions are no longer dictated by how someone responds to you, your behavior naturally becomes less predictable. Not because you're trying to surprise, but because you're no longer following a script written by external validation. You can start training this immediately. One simple exercise is to slow your internal reactions. When you feel the impulse to respond instantly, whether emotionally or verbally, pause. Not to manipulate, just to choose. Ask yourself, is this response coming from clarity or from tension? Over time, this pause creates a gap between stimulus and action. In that gap, unpredictability is born, because now your responses are intentional, not automatic. They don't follow patterns people can map out in advance. Another practice is to anchor yourself in routines that are invisible to others. Internal consistency matters more than external consistency. Daily reflection, physical discipline, quiet solitude, mental rehearsal, these stabilize you. And paradoxically, the more stable you are internally, the more fluid and spontaneous you appear externally. You stop needing to prove continuity. You stop announcing plans. You stop seeking confirmation. Your presence becomes lighter, less traceable, harder to pin down. There's also power in not always revealing your emotional trajectory. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means not broadcasting it. Not every feeling needs translation. Not every thought needs airtime. When you share selectively, when you allow people to discover layers instead of being handed the entire map, curiosity grows. The Stoics often emphasized restraint not as repression, but as mastery. You're not hiding, you're packing, and packing creates pull. Try this mental drill. For the next few days, observe how often you act to maintain predictability, how often you respond just to reassure, how often you explain yourself to avoid discomfort. Don't judge it, just notice it. Awareness alone begins to break the pattern. Then gradually start removing one unnecessary explanation per interaction, one emotional reflex, one anticipatory move. Replace it with calm presence, with grounded silence, with a response that feels true, even if it's not what's expected. Unpredictability without inconsistency is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming less reactive, less eager, less performative, and more rooted. When you live this way, people feel it immediately. There's a subtle tension around you, not anxiety but intrigue. You don't rush toward outcomes. You don't cling to impressions. You let attraction breathe. And in that space, the chase begins naturally, without force, without games, without you ever having to ask for it. Take this seriously. Practice it daily. Let your inner discipline shape your outer freedom. As reminded himself and now reminds you, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That strength is what makes you unpredictable in the right way. And once you embody it, nothing about you feels ordinary again. Number 7. Strong boundaries, enforced without explanation. Strong boundaries enforced without explanation is one of those ideas that sounds simple, almost too simple, until you actually try to live it. And when you do, everything changes. Not because you're trying to control anyone, not because you're playing games, but because you finally stop leaking your energy through overexplaining, justifying, and negotiating your self-respect away. You decide, quietly and firmly, that your standards are not a debate, and that decision alone alters how you are perceived. Most people don't realize how much attraction is tied to emotional posture. When you explain yourself endlessly, you're unconsciously asking for permission to exist as you are. You're saying, please understand me so I can be allowed to hold this line. Strong boundaries do the opposite. They say, this is where I stand. You can respond however you choose. That calm certainty is rare, and rarity creates pull. You don't need to announce your strength. You let it be felt. Stoic philosophy has always emphasized this inner firmness. Epictetus warned that if you want to improve, you must be willing to appear foolish to those who misunderstand you. That's the heart of boundaries without explanation. You release the need to be seen as reasonable, kind, or agreeable in every moment. You accept that not everyone will like your limits, and you don't rush in to soften them. The paradox is that the less you try to manage reactions, the more powerful your presence becomes. You may notice an internal discomfort when you first stop explaining yourself. That's conditioning talking. You've been trained to believe that silence equals guilt, that firmness equals cruelty, that boundaries must be justified to be valid. They don't. A boundary is not an argument, it's a statement of self-knowledge. Wrote that a person should stand straight, not be straightened. That line wasn't about arrogance. It was about self-alignment. When you explain less, you align more. What makes this psychologically magnetic is that it creates a subtle tension. When you don't overclarify, the other person has to fill in the blanks. The human mind hates unresolved space. It leans in. It wonders. It replays interactions. Not because you manipulated anything, but because you didn't over-deliver reassurance. You trusted yourself enough to stop talking. That restraint signals confidence far louder than words ever could. This doesn't mean you become cold or dismissive. There's a difference between emotional control and emotional shutdown. Strong boundaries are warm, calm, and immovable. You can be respectful without being porous. You can be kind without being flexible where it matters. Seneca wrote that he who is brave is free. Boundaries are a form of freedom. They free you from the reflex to defend your choices, and that freedom shows. If you want to adopt this habit, start with awareness. Notice how often you explain yourself when you don't need to. Notice how quickly you rush to clarify, soften, or justify a decision that already feels right in your body. The moment you catch that impulse, pause, breathe, say less, or say nothing at all. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is not weakness, it's discipline. Here's a simple exercise. For the next few days, whenever you set a boundary, limit your response to one sentence. No follow-ups, no extra context, no emotional padding, just the decision. Let the discomfort rise and fall without fixing it. That discomfort is your old pattern dissolving. Stay with it. You're teaching your nervous system that you don't need approval to hold your line. Another practice is mental rehearsal. Before conversations, decide in advance where your boundary is and how you'll express it simply. Not perfectly, simply. The Stoics believed preparation was a form of peace. When you prepare internally, you don't scramble externally. You don't explain because you don't panic. You already know who you are in that moment. Over time, something subtle happens. You stop trying to be chosen. You start choosing. And that shift is felt immediately. People sense when you are centered in yourself rather than orbiting their reactions. Attraction grows in the space where self-respect is non-negotiable. You're no longer persuading, you're presenting. This approach also filters the right responses naturally. When you explain less, you reveal more. You reveal who respects boundaries and who resists them. You reveal who leans in with curiosity and who pushes for control. That clarity is invaluable. The Stoics valued clarity above comfort. They understood that a calm life requires firm edges. You don't need to announce that you're adopting this mindset. You embody it quietly. You stop arguing with discomfort. You stop managing perceptions. You let your actions speak and your silence do the rest. In a world addicted to noise, restraint stands out. So take this seriously. Practice it daily. Catch yourself mid-explanation and stop. Feel the urge to justify and let it pass. Remind yourself that your standards are not a presentation, they're a posture. As advised, waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one. Strong boundaries enforced without explanation are not a trick. They're a decision. And once you make it, everything downstream begins to change. Number 8. Detachment from outcomes and expectations. Detachment from outcomes and expectations is not about indifference, it's about power. And once you truly understand that distinction, the way you show up around women changes in a way that feels subtle on the surface, yet deeply unsettling to the patterns they're used to. You stop leaning forward emotionally. You stop waiting for reactions. You stop measuring your worth by how things unfold. And paradoxically, that's when pursuit often flips direction. Wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That sentence alone contains the entire foundation of this principle. When you detach from outcomes, you are no longer negotiating your internal state with the external world. You're not hopping for a text to feel calm. You're not needing interest to feel validated. You're not chasing certainty to escape discomfort. You are grounded in yourself first. Everything else becomes optional, not essential. Most men don't realize how loudly expectations speak, even when no words are said. Expectation leaks through tone, packing, eye contact, and energy. It shows up as subtle urgency, as overinvestment too early, as the silent question underneath every interaction: is this going where I want it to go? When you're attached to outcomes, you unconsciously pressure the moment. And pressure kills curiosity. Detachment removes that pressure entirely. It creates space. And human psychology is drawn to space far more than force. Detachment doesn't mean you don't desire, it means you don't cling. You can want something without bending your spine around it. You can be interested without being dependent. This is where many people get confused. They think detachment equals coldness or emotional withdrawal. It doesn't. It equals emotional self-sufficiency. Seneca put it plainly: he suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary. Expectations are future suffering pulled into the present. Detachment dissolves that unnecessary weight. When you release expectations, you stop trying to manage impressions. You're no longer performing for a result. You speak when you mean it. You pause without fear. You allow silence without rushing to fill it. You listen without rehearsing. That calm presence is rare because most people are internally negotiating for approval. When you're not, it stands out. Not loudly, quietly. And quiet confidence is far more magnetic than loud certainty. There's also a deeper layer here that few talk about. Detachment makes you unpredictable in the healthiest way. Not chaotic, not inconsistent, simply unhooked. When someone can't easily read whether you're trying to win something from them, their mind naturally leans in. Not because of manipulation, but because unresolved patterns draw attention. When you're detached, you don't chase reassurance. You don't rush milestones. You don't need to define things prematurely. You let dynamics reveal themselves instead of forcing clarity too soon. Epictetus taught, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and your life will go smoothly. That mindset shifts your entire emotional posture. You become responsive instead of reactive. You observe instead of overinterpreting. You move forward but without dragging expectations behind you like chains. And that emotional freedom is felt, even if it's never consciously identified. Now, this is not something you just understand intellectually. It's a habit you build, a discipline you practice daily. Start by noticing where your mind runs ahead of the present moment, where it imagines outcomes, scripts, futures, confirmations. Every time you catch that, gently pull yourself back to now, back to breath, back to posture, back to what is actually happening, not what you hope will happen. This alone begins to loosen the grip of expectation. Another practice is emotional independence training. Before any interaction, remind yourself, quietly, without drama, that your mood will not be negotiated. Say it internally, nothing I receive today defines me. Not interest, not distance, not enthusiasm, not silence. This is not suppression, it's alignment. You're aligning your emotional center with your values, not with someone else's reactions. You can also practice intentional non-attachment by deliberately letting moments unfold without steering them. Resist the impulse to accelerate. Resist the urge to secure outcomes. Let conversations end naturally. Let interest rise or fall without interference. This requires trust in yourself, and trust is felt. People sense when you are not trying to extract something from them. Detachment also sharpens your standards. When you're not outcome-focused, you stop tolerating misalignment just to keep momentum. You don't over-rationalize. You don't over-invest in potential. You observe reality clearly, and clarity breeds respect, including self-respect. Again reminds us, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Detachment allows you to act from principle rather than fear of loss. What makes this so powerful is that it shifts the emotional labor. Instead of you carrying the weight of anticipation, uncertainty, and hope, you simply remain present. That presence invites others to step forward if they choose. And if they don't, nothing inside you collapses. That stability is rare, and rarity creates value. So begin today, not tomorrow, not after the next interaction. Today, practice releasing mental narratives. Practice wanting without needing. Practice showing up fully, then letting go completely. The moment you stop chasing outcomes is the moment you start attracting attention without effort. Not because you're playing a trick, but because you've reclaimed your inner authority. And that ultimately is what makes people chase. Not your strategies, not your words, not your timing, but your unshakable sense that you are already whole, with or without any particular result. Number 9, deep presence and attentive listening. Deep presence and attentive listening is not a tactic you perform on someone. It's a state you train yourself to enter. And once you do, everything about how people respond to you changes, quietly, almost invisibly, but powerfully. You stop chasing reactions. You stop forcing momentum. You become still. And that stillness pulls attention toward you without asking permission. Most people listen to respond. You learn to listen to understand. That shift alone places you far ahead of the crowd. When you are deeply present, you are not scanning for approval, not rehearsing what to say next, not trying to impress. You are here, fully, calmly, grounded in the moment. That presence is rare, and rarity creates value without effort. As warned, most of what we say and do is unnecessary. You feel this truth when you stop filling silence and start holding it. Presence begins internally. If your mind is restless, your body leaks that restlessness. You might nod, smile, say the right words, but something feels off. So the first habit you adopt is internal quiet. Every day you practice slowing your thoughts instead of chasing them. You sit with stillness long enough that it stops feeling uncomfortable. This is not passive. It is disciplined. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." You take that literally, not just in conversation, but in life. When you listen attentively, you don't interrupt with stories, fixes, or opinions. You don't steer the conversation back to yourself. You let the other person unfold at their own pace. You stay curious, not reactive. This creates a subtle emotional safety. People relax when they feel unjudged and unhurried. And when someone relaxes around you, they associate that calm with you. They want more of it. They seek it out. Not consciously at first, but instinctively. You begin to notice how powerful silence is. Silence done right is not awkward, it's spacious. It gives the other person room to go deeper, to reveal more than they plan to. You don't rush to fill gaps. You hold eye contact without intensity, without demand. You let pauses breathe. This alone signals confidence. Not loud confidence, composed confidence. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. The trick is that you're not doing this to get chased. You're doing it because it's who you are becoming. Desire follows alignment. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." When you're scattered, your attention diluted, people feel it. When you're focused, present, anchored, your attention feels like a gift, and people chase what feels valuable. To train this, you adopt simple but demanding exercises. One is single tasking. When someone speaks to you, you put everything else away. No mental multitasking, no planning, just listening. Another is reflective listening. You paraphrase what you heard, not to sound clever but to ensure clarity. You slow the pace of the exchange. You ask fewer questions but better ones. And then you stop. You let the answer land. You also practice emotional restraint. You don't overreact. You don't rush to validate or challenge. You let emotions surface and pass. This emotional steadiness is deeply attractive because it signals inner order. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. When you embody this, people feel safe expressing themselves around you. Safety creates attachment. Attachment creates pursuit. There's another layer here that most miss. Deep listening makes the other person feel seen, not evaluated. And being seen without pressure is addictive. You're not trying to extract something from the interaction. You're not performing, you're witnessing. That's rare in a world full of noise and distraction. Over time, people begin to lean toward you emotionally, then psychologically. They start initiating. They start seeking your attention, not because you demanded it, but because you didn't. You must also let go of the urge to be interesting. This is crucial. The moment you stop trying to impress, you become impressive. Your calm attention does the work for you. You speak less, but what you say carries weight. You choose words deliberately. You allow mystery to remain. As Seneca said, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Delay applies to speech too. You pause, you consider. You respond only when necessary. Make this a daily discipline. In every interaction, ask yourself, am I fully here or am I waiting to speak? When you catch yourself drifting, bring your attention back, gently, without judgment. Presence is a muscle. It strengthens with use. At first, it feels unnatural. Then it feels grounding. Eventually, it becomes who you are. And something interesting happens when you embody this consistently. You stop caring whether someone chases you or not. You enjoy the moment as it is. That detachment is magnetic, not cold, not indifferent, just unneedy. Epictetus put it simply, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Be content to listen. Be content to be quiet. Be content to let others reveal themselves first. Deep presence and attentive listening is not a trick you turn on and off. It's a way of moving through the world. And when you live this way, pursuit becomes a byproduct, not a goal. You don't chase. You don't persuade. You allow. And in that space you create, others move toward you on their own. Adopt this habit, practice it daily. Let it reshape how you show up. The shift will be subtle, but the results will not be. Number 10. Self-respect demonstrated through decisive action. Self-respect isn't something you announce, it's something you move with. And one of the clearest ways it reveals itself is through decisive action. Not loud action, not impulsive action. Calm, deliberate, final action. When you decide, you move. When you move, you don't look back for approval. That alone changes how you're perceived. People feel it before they understand it. Women especially sense it because decisiveness signals inner order. It says you are not fragmented inside. You are not negotiating with your doubts every second. You know where you stand, and that creates gravity. Wrote, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Decisive action is exactly that. You stop explaining your values and start embodying them. You don't hover, you don't hesitate endlessly. You don't ask for permission to act in alignment with your standards. When you say yes, it's a real yes. When you say no, it's complete. That consistency is rare, and rarity creates attraction. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you're no longer trying to be liked. You're being accurate with yourself. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a byproduct of movement, not a prerequisite. Decisive men don't feel more confident, they act more clearly. Every time you delay a decision you already know the answer to, you leak self-respect. Every time you act cleanly, even when it's uncomfortable, you reinforce it. And self-respect compounds. People begin to adjust around you because they can feel that you won't bend just to keep things pleasant. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Notice the order. Identity first, action second. Not endless analysis in between. When you decide who you are, your actions naturally follow. Decisiveness is not about speed, it's about alignment. You pause only long enough to listen to your principles, then you move. No theatrics, no second guessing. That kind of movement feels solid, and solidity is magnetic. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth when your actions already declare it. Decisive action tells the world you trust yourself. And trust is contagious. When you hesitate, others hesitate around you. When you move with calm certainty, others relax. Women feel safe around that energy because it's predictable without being boring. It's firm without being rigid. It says, "I can lead myself, so I don't need to control you." There's also something subtle happening beneath the surface. Decisive action removes emotional bargaining. You're not trading authenticity for attention. You're not performing patience while secretly resenting it. You act when action is required. You step back when alignment is lost. That clarity creates tension in a healthy way. It leaves space. It leaves unanswered questions. And that space invites pursuit without you ever asking for it. Seneca warned, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." Indecision is exactly that, drifting. When you drift, you try to make every wind work. When you decide, you choose a direction and let the rest go. This applies internally first. Decide what you tolerate. Decide how you respond. Decide when you disengage. The moment those decisions are made internally, your external behavior simplifies. No overexplaining, no overinvesting. No chasing clarity from people who haven't earned it. Now, this isn't about forcing outcomes. It's about refusing to abandon yourself in the process. Decisive action can look like stepping forward, but it can also look like stepping away without drama. Silence can be decisive. Stillness can be decisive. What matters is that you know why you're doing it and that you do it fully. Half measures create confusion. Full measures create respect. Here's a practical exercise you can start today. For the next 7 days, notice every moment you delay a decision you already feel internally resolved. Write it down. Don't judge it, just observe it. Then, in the moment it happens again, act within 10 seconds, not recklessly, honestly. This trains your nervous system to associate self-trust with safety. You'll feel resistance at first. That's normal. Resistance is just the old habit trying to keep control. Another exercise: define 3 non-negotiables for how you show up. Not what you want from others, how you act. Decide them clearly. Then practice acting on them without announcing them. Let your behavior carry the message. This rewires your sense of identity. You stop asking, "How am I being perceived?" and start asking, "Am I aligned?" That internal shift is powerful. You should also practice decisiveness in small, low-stakes areas. Choose faster, commit fully, finish what you start. These micro-decisions stack. Over time, you'll notice something interesting. You'll need less reassurance, less validation, less explanation. Your presence alone will do the work. And when that happens, attraction becomes a side effect, not a goal. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Decisive action is the expression of that power. You're not trying to control outcomes. You're controlling your response. You're choosing who you are in motion. And that is deeply attractive because it's rare, grounded, and unmistakably real. So stop rehearsing decisions in your head. Stop negotiating with hesitation. Decide, act, adjust if needed, but don't freeze. Every clean action strengthens your self-respect. And self-respect, when lived rather than spoken, makes people lean in without knowing why. If there's one thing to remember, it's this: attraction is never about chasing, proving, or performing. It's about who you become when you no longer need anything from anyone. The men who are chased aren't louder, flashier, or more manipulative. They're grounded, composed, and emotionally unshakable. They move with intention. They speak when it matters. And they're perfectly comfortable walking away. Every psychological principle you learn today works only when it comes from inner discipline, not strategy. When you stop trying to control outcomes and start mastering yourself, people feel it. They sense the calm, the certainty, the quiet strength that doesn't beg for validation. So don't rush to apply everything at once. Absorb it. Practice restraint. Let your behavior change before your words ever do. Attraction isn't something you demand. It's something others discover when you're no longer seeking approval. If this video resonated with you, make sure you like it, subscribe, and stay with this channel. We're not here to teach tricks. We're here to build men who are respected, desired, and unshaken by the world. And remember, the moment you stop chasing is often the moment you're chased.